live. Today, U.S. election. What's next? I'm Joe Lauria, the editor-in-chief of Consortium News.
And I'm Elizabeth Voss.
Defying predictions of a very tight race, Donald Trump last night swept back into power with a decisive victory in both the Electoral College and the popular vote. It was an utter denunciation of the Biden administration and its handpicked candidate, Kamala Harris.
With us today to discuss last night's result and the way forward are Black Agenda Report editor Margaret Kimberley, CIA whistleblower John Kiriakou, political activist and organizer Brian Becker, Trends Journal editor Gerald Celente, commentator Niko House, economist Richard Wolff, CN columnist Patrick Lawrence, and former UN's weapons inspector and CN columnist Scott Ritter.
Among the issues we will discuss with this all-star cast are the implications of Trump's victory abroad, in Ukraine, the Middle East, China, and Europe, the role of the Gaza genocide and the Ukraine war that it played in the voting, the impact on the U.S. and world economy, how the Democrats will react this time to defeat, how they could have fielded perhaps a better candidate, what is the Democratic Party's future, and can it continue to depend on the Black and Latino vote? With us now in this first segment is Margaret Kimberley, Patrick Lawrence, and John Kiriakou. Patrick, let me start with you. You're in Switzerland. You may leave soon. Give me your general thoughts. Were you surprised? Did you think, in our panel last night with Gerald here, Scott Ritter predicted a landslide for Trump. Of course, I believed everybody else. It was going to be tight. We wouldn't know the result for 3 weeks.
Yeah, I'm surprised. It was a trounce, so far as I can make out. And I think the media did the same damn thing they did in 2016. They completely misrepresented what was going on in the country, right? And the Democratic Party completely overestimated, rather hubristically overestimated their position. And boom, I was very surprised, right? I think now, thinking about the foreign side, the deep state loved Kamala Harris. Why is that? Well, they don't. Kamala Harris would have served the deep state the way a cocktail waitress takes orders, right? The question for me now is, what's going to happen with Trump? Okay, I don't think we should be under any illusions that he's going to drain the swamp and all that. But what are his relations going to be with the national security state? High on the list of questions, who's going to be around him? Last time around with Trump, we had the very strangest roster of people. Strange in that they didn't match his thinking at all. McMaster, Jim Mattis, Mark Esper, Bolton. What in hell were these people doing around him? I've argued for years. I don't think he chose those people. I think they were imposed upon him. So the question now is, what sort of people can he gather around him now? Douglas McGregor sort of people, right? I think that will make a very big difference to what we see out front. That's my initial response.
Well, you said that he didn't follow his own thinking. Do we really know what his own thinking is? It never really properly emerged, or does he have any?
Well, I did hesitate to use the word thinking, but he had some. Look, I'm not shy of saying he had a few very good ideas. A new détente with Russia, good. An end to the adventure wars, right? Removing troops from the Middle East, Syria, Iraq, and all that, good. What are we doing with NATO? Do we need NATO? These were very good ideas, but every step of the way, he was subverted. He was sabotaged. I think the most dramatic case, as far as being an Asia hand of a sort, was his démarche with Kim Jong-un. It was open and shut that Bolton sabotaged what could have been a very productive, opening. Two Reuters correspondents actually drilled into this when they were in Hanoi. That's where the whole thing tipped over, and gave a real TikTok how Bolton did that. There's no question of it. So I'm looking for who's going to be around next.
Absolutely.
I don't think, even setting aside who his people will be, I'm not looking for any revolution in American foreign policy, right?
Let me move to John to talk about that question: who's going to surround himself with? One of the things that is wrong, in my view, of the American system as opposed to a parliamentary system is that we don't know who the cabinet is going to be before the election. In a British or any parliamentary system, you have shadow ministers. You have to announce to the public who's your Secretary of State going to be, who's your defense minister going to be, who's going to run the Treasury or the finance minister. This is all known because they're all members of parliament and they have this position. So you're voting for a government, not an individual. Here in the U.S., we vote for an individual and they name their vice president, most inconsequential person. So, John, what do you say about his relationship with the security state? You're uniquely positioned to answer that question in terms of who he will appoint. We're going to see Bolton, or we're going to see Pompeo, for example.
Well, he's been criticized heavily over the years for his appointments of people like Bolton or Mike Pompeo or Gina Haspel. And I have to think that, following criticism of their tenures in office, that he's going to try to steer away from the neocons who pulled him off course. I would think. We don't really know. You make a good point that this is not a parliamentary system, so we really don't know who it is he might pull into these positions. But I think that we're going to see a different kind of Donald Trump foreign policy, because now he's going to be more concerned about his legacy. Now he's going to be more concerned about the next generation of populist Trump Republicans and about passing on his ideas of foreign and domestic policy to that next generation of Republicans. So I wouldn't be surprised to see, a Rick Grinnell, for example, rumored to be in line. I know, right? Rumored to be in line for Director of National Intelligence. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see somebody that none of us may have considered, a name that just isn't in the mix. Traditionally, when mainstream Democrats and Republicans win an election, their aides or their campaigns leak the names being considered to then get a sense of public reaction. I don't think Donald Trump cares about public reaction. I think this time we're going to see people who are more purely pro-Trump and who are going to carry out his policies without question. I think that we may see somebody like Doug McGregor, and I think that all of us here would agree with Doug McGregor on a lot of different issues. We may think that he's wrong on some, but I know Doug McGregor. I consider him to be a friend. And where he and I may disagree on, let's say, immigration, he's 100% right on issues of war and peace. So maybe, perhaps, we'll be pleasantly surprised this time around. I'm going to allow myself to be optimistic for a little while.
Just a second, Patrick. I know Rick Grinnell. I consider him to be an enemy. He was the spokesman of John Bolton at the UN when I was a reporter there, and he rang me up because of a question I'd asked about Israel in the daily noon briefing at the UN. He's a real piece of work. Richard Wolff, before we go back to Patrick, you have to leave in half an hour. Is that correct? You're muted, for one thing. So we've just lost another minute of your precious time. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Richard, you have a half an hour. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Can I have Patrick just do a quick follow-up, and then we'll go to you for your economic take on what a new Trump administration could mean in the U.S. economy and world economy, and then we'll go to Margaret. Patrick, quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. I'm just wondering what John might think of the weight J.D. Vance might bear in gathering Trump's people. It was quite remarkable when Trump chose Vance. The Democrats absolutely freaked out. In my read, from a distance, I admit, I think they freaked out because they realized this son of a gun could run in 2028 very credibly, and carry on whatever you want to call it, MAGA. I'm wondering what John thinks about Vance's position in Trump's appointments.
Can we hold off, John, on your answer? Because I didn't know he was going to ask you a
Certainly.
question. So
Certainly.
Richard, tell us your general feelings. Were you surprised by the result? And give us an economic view of what a Trump administration, a new one, will mean.
Well, I don't want to claim foresight. I didn't have it any more than anybody else. I did notice beforehand something which I feel more strongly about now, and that is that this was a race between somebody who knew that the issues of economics have to be rendered to an American population whose economic literacy is zero. And he knew it, and he didn't bother with details. He came up with two basic ideas. One, that the American economy and the working people are suffering, which, by the way, is true. And number two, that he could present himself as the great protector, the great reverser of this situation by doing two things: protecting us all from the invasion of immigrants and protecting us all from the evil Chinese, one with a wall of steel and the other one with a wall of tariffs. Simple idea, easily conveyed, plausible. You can get that across. Against that, in my humble opinion, Kamala Harris offered nothing, nothing comparable, nothing big, nothing bold. Bernie Sanders might have done that, whether he intended it or not. But she not only didn't do, obviously, what Sanders would have done, she offered nothing. $25,000 to a family starting to buy a home. No taxes on tips. Enhancing the child tax credit. These are details. Most people don't even understand what they are or what they mean, are not affected by them very much, or don't know it. In other words, nothing comparable to his big story. Every advertiser understands this. That's what he is anyway, an advertiser, mostly of himself. And he's good at that. And she didn't do it very well. And the people around her, well, not to put a fine point on it, they stink at what they're doing, and where she collected them and how is a mystery to me. Now, as to what Mr. Trump will do in economics, it's really the same argument. The two proposals are economic nonsense. This is not a question of point of view, whether I agree with him or not. I'm fighting here with a bag of cement. This is not interesting. Everybody who knows about this will tell you tariffs are a no-go. That's not going to work. That is shooting yourself in the foot 5 different ways. It is total bullshit. It's been bullshit. It is bullshit now. And when he says it, it's just bigger bullshit. He says it because he has no idea what he's talking about. It's like referring to Kamala Harris as a communist, socialist, Marxist, fascist. That can only be done by someone who has no concept about what those words mean. He knows what their function is. It's like saying Kamala Harris is poo-poo. It's a 4-year-old putting a bad word on something because they've learned that that has some social effect. So has he. Tariffs don't work. The Chamber of Commerce of the United States is against them. Mr. Musk would be dead in the water if we have the tariffs that are being proposed. The inflation we just suffered, which helped get Mr. Trump into office, will go up much further if they do anything like that. So I don't know what he's going to do, but on tariffs, nothing. It's complete cuckoo. It goes nowhere. And likewise, if you take seriously the border, Here's a simple reality, and I say this to you wearing my invisible hat as a professional economist, a rank I have of which I have no pride at all. Any case, here it is. We are a nation of 330 million people. We have a complicated, modern, big, rich economy. I used to say we're the dominant, rich economy. We are not anymore, and we're sinking fast. Something which could have been a central feature of this race, but both candidates agreed never to say a word about it. Okay? What is he going to do, Mr. Trump, about this? I have no clue, because he has no clue. He doesn't know what to do about the declining economy, about the fact that the dollar doesn't play the role in the world that it did before, that the level of indebtedness of our corporations, of our household, and of our government are at record levels we've never seen before, and therefore open us up to cascading down to nothing. So to ask me what are going to be his policies, he doesn't know. Now, maybe, and I have my friends who are conspiracy theorists, Project 2025 and the nefarious folks around him, maybe they have some idea. But if so, it's quite kept quiet. Mr. Trump, just to give you an idea, promised not to touch Social Security. He did that several times, and not to touch Medicare. He also said he's going to deport millions of people. Those millions of people are currently putting money into the Social Security system every week. If you deport them, they won't. And that means the funding problem of the Social Security system is just going to get closer. Mr. Biden has a 100% tariff, and then I'll stop with this. He has a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles. Okay, 100%. That means if you want to buy a Chinese electric vehicle that costs $30,000, you would have to, if you're an American, you'd have to pay $30,000 to go to China to pay for the car, and another $30,000 to Uncle Sam as a tariff, meaning the price of the car is $60,000, which is why you will see no Chinese electric vehicles on the roads of the United States. But if you go to Europe this summer on your vacation, you'll see loads of them all over Europe. Why? Because the Chinese have built by far, the best, cheapest electric vehicles on this planet. And they are marketing all over the world, everywhere, Asia, Africa, Latin America. They don't need the American market. And what does it mean? And here's my final point, because it illustrates the absurdity, not just by the way of Mr. Trump, but to be honest, and among friends, the same is true of Ms. Harris. The same. Here's the problem. Every competitor of the United States, no matter what they produce, food, clothing, shelter, software programs, typewriters, you name it, they are all buying the highest quality, lowest price electric car and truck that they need as inputs to their production process. Their American competitors cannot do that because they can't get those cars and trucks at the prices everybody else is paying for them. Americans will therefore have to buy electric cars from American or non-Chinese producers that are much poorer quality at a much higher price. You know what that means? That is a blow to the competitive survival of what's left of manufacturing in this country, which ain't much. That's what his program will be like on steroids if he extends these kinds of tariffs, which is what he mumbles in his speeches, to the rest of production. This is economic nonsense. If he tries to do it, it'll blow up in his face. If he stops from doing it, which is what I guess will happen, he'll have to start from scratch And what he'll do is little tinkering around the margins, which is what he did the first time and is what he's showing is the most we can expect for him at this point that goes through. This is a man whose party and whose program do not address in any way that I can discern what the hell is about this country's gap between rich and poor. Nothing. This country's subjection to a irregular, unstable business cycle as we go from recession to inflation. What do they offer? Nothing. The end of the U.S. empire, now it's a century, we're finished with that. We lost in Vietnam, we lost in Afghanistan, we're losing in Iraq, we're losing in Ukraine. I mean, how much more does this have to go? That's why half the world isn't using the dollar the way they used to. That's why there's BRICS. Everyone sees it. And this clown is just another brick in this process of disintegration. And that means he's going to have unexpected breakthroughs here, there. I can't predict them any more than anybody else can, for which he won't be prepared either, because this is a specialist campaign in make-believe. Very clever, well marketed. But if you believe this, then you're in right up there with the people who believe if they only use that brand of soap each day, their sex life will get way better.
You're muted, Joe.
I said there's a lot to chew on there, Richard. Thank you very much. And I want to go to Margaret, but one last question for you, because I know you have to run, and that is, Trump may think that these tariffs could reindustrialize the U.S. Is there any way to bring back industry on the scale, or even close to the scale it once was, like in the 1950s or something? Or has that ship sailed here in north of England, throughout the West? Germany now has become deindustrialized. Is it possible to bring back those industrial jobs again? Yes or no?
No. The simple answer is no. Every one of the last 5 presidents has promised to do that, and not a single one achieved it, Republican, Democrat alike. It's more bullshit because it sounds good, for which they have absolutely no basis. And just a moment further on it. Why would any foreign producer or American producer come here? The wages are still too high. They're not going to come here. They left this country for 2 reasons. And by the way, notice how clever Trump kept blaming the Chinese. He kept making a mistake that a freshman in economics flunks for making. He kept saying, I'm going to hit the Chinese with tariffs, hoping that Americans wouldn't understand that a tariff is a tax levied by the U.S. government on U.S. importers who pay it. It's that conservative anti-tax party, the Republicans, hitting us with staggering taxes. Why would anyone come here who's a foreigner? This is more dangerous time to be a foreigner in the United States than we've had in half a century. It's too dangerous. They're coming here. Rich people from around the world are selling their apartments. I live in Manhattan, right down the street from me. They're selling them left and right. It's too dangerous to be here if you're a Muslim. And there are a lot more Muslims than there are Jews, for example. And that's a really important issue for a whole lot of people, like the real estate business here in New York. It's craziness. If they did come back, they'd have to pay all the prices of goods in the United States. And they can't afford that, and they won't be competitive. They're not going to do that. If you make it impossible for them to stay in China, which you did for some, you know what their solution was? They went to Vietnam, which, by the way, is a great economic development success story. Run by the Communist Party, by the way, very tremendous growth numbers. But part of that is overflow. They're not coming back here. I have taught in business schools. We teach people in business school, if you want to be successful, go to where the wages are low and the market is expanding. Well, in case you don't know, China is where the wages are low and the market is expanding. It is the number one place for those two qualities. And that's why American corporations made the decision. China didn't do that. American corporations made the decision to go there, and they will go there or somewhere else. And the rest of the world is competing one with the other to be the place. So what are you going to do? Whack the Chinese, then whack the Indians, then whack the Brazilians? Here's the irony. And for this, you have to love the German philosopher Hegel. In the process of isolating our enemies, the end result is we are isolating ourselves. We're all alone. Maybe with the Israelis, but man, that's not a good friend to have at this point as they self-destruct. It is a remarkable moment that we're in. And to this moment of remarkable stress and remarkable economic problems, we got a dose of Trumpian Madison Avenue advertising schlock. Nothing there. It's gone. It doesn't tell us what he's going to do because nobody in their right mind, not even him, would proceed on this without people around him saying, you're crazy. You're going to be the first president run out of town on a rail for this kind of nonsense. It's good for the campaign, but now all of that's behind us. You have no more campaigns unless you get the law changed about two consecutive terms. No, he might do that. He may have all he needs to get that done, and that will be proper payoff to Mr. Roosevelt, who was the one who forced that through because he got reelected 3 times. So now Mr. Trump will set that as his goal. Why not? But there's nothing there in economics. There's nothing there. And that's, of course, what happens when an economy collapses, when it can't be carried anymore by being the number one in the world, when it isn't alone anymore, as we have been since 1945, sitting atop of the world, able to make whatever mistakes we want because we're so big and so rich and everybody else is so much not that we can kind of do what we want. Those people up there, they still live in that world. The neocons live in it politically, and the people he gets as economic advisors, who are a joke, Mr. Navarro, I mean, unbelievable nonsense comes out of their mouth. These are not serious people. They suck up to him, fine, and he puts them in office, fine. Meanwhile, the actuality of our economy is a disaster getting worse, and these people are new modern versions of Nero playing his crappy violin.
Richard, that's brilliant. Anybody have a response before he has to leave us? Want to add anything to that?
Well, I wanted to thank you. It's wonderful that you're doing this and that you're doing it so quickly after the events of yesterday. It's very important that people hear struggles amongst us as to how to make sense of this and where to take it. Otherwise, they just sit there as if, hit by a punch in the gut, not knowing kind of what to do, just feeling really bad. I've encountered 25 people like that today. They need programs like this.
Well, Richard,
have a community that's doing this.
Will there come a day when the working people in the United States don't believe Trump anymore? They're not going to be let along. And what happens then when they realize both parties have sold them out and they're going to do nothing for them? Will it explode?
I hope not. I hope what people like you and those of you I know and those that I don't, I hope this doesn't destroy my reputation among you. We have to have another political party that's willing to say and do what we believe and not to be hesitant all the time, not to worry, to run a couple of elections where we do badly because everybody votes for the lesser evil. Okay, they already do that. We won't be behind if they do that. Meanwhile, we have enough people. We have enough people. I run around the country giving talks. I've been doing it all my life. It's better now than it ever was, the reception I get around the country, including for the media stuff that we do. So I have no reason not to believe that that's the best thing we now have. We have to get together. People like you and me, every one of you, and build such a movement, build such an organization, and then go to the people. We'll never know whether they might not unless they try. It's very clear if you go around the country that a lot of people were very sorry when Bernie withdrew effectively to do what he did. I understand. I don't mean to throw stones. He opened a space for us in very crucial ways. We're all in his debt. I feel that way. But we have to do what he began and didn't do. And unless we do that, we're going to be having these kinds of meetings, which are important.
It's not inside the Democratic Party. But this is not the
No.
party of FDR anymore, and it never will be. Bill Clinton destroyed that by his move to the center right, his neoliberal move like Blair in Britain. So there's got to be, say, another party. And we know all the pitfalls to starting another party. But I think this election also shows more and more people are fed up with both parties, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah. By the way, the flip side, one last thing. I had to give a talk 2 days ago before the election, and I had to give a talk on media in response to Larry Fink. Larry Fink is the head of BlackRock, one of the major corporate hedge funds, capital investors. He owns he supervises, he by himself, several trillions of dollars worth of assets. And he gave a speech here in New York somewhere. And in the speech, which I read, he said the following: I don't understand what all the hoopla is about. Who wins this race? It doesn't matter. I have very good relationships with both candidates. What's all the hoop-de-doo? Why are people... Get over it. It doesn't matter. Nothing changes all that much one way or the other. But I think that's wonderful. That's exactly what you were just saying, only we're on the other end of the spectrum making the same comment. It doesn't change. And the mass of people, they don't think it's going to change. They just don't think so. And that's because neither of the parties suggests to them that there's anything like a big change coming. Not people on our end of the political spectrum. Maybe to a white supremacist, there's a hope, oh, I'm going to be able to do more than I used to. Maybe someone who hates women is going to think, oh, I'm going to be able to control women in the way we did in the good old days. Yeah, there are those. But on our side of the political spectrum, no. We face people who either understand the issues, who are few, or people who feel this has got nothing to do with me, like Larry Fink. And we ought to think about that situation a lot. He's not worried.
Think about Fink. Thank you, Richard, very, very much for that.
Thank you.
Margaret, bye-bye. Thank you. Margaret, you've been patiently waiting. I'm particularly interested in knowing if you could comment and say anything you want about this election, but I also want to know your view of how the Democrats performed and what their campaigns are like and what future do they have. I want to open up that issue with you.
Sure. Well, I think there's a number that someone told me earlier today, which I looked up. Kamala Harris received 14 million fewer votes than Biden did 4 years ago. That tells you, I think, quite a lot. Democratic Party voters couldn't be bothered to leave their homes and vote for her. She, excuse me, she offered nothing. She was not in a primary. I think one thing we can look forward to is that won't happen again. Excuse me very much. I think that's it for me for the coughing. I think it's going to be the last time they try that. She was just plopped down. They should have eased Biden out a couple years ago. After the 2022 midterms, I'm really surprised they didn't, but they didn't. Then they knew he was faltering. Then they don't know what to do. It's kind of awkward to bypass her. The rich donors go along. She talks about joy and kissing up to, and that whole, can we say this? Let me say this. There's no such thing as a never Trump Republican. They don't exist. They're like unicorns. She spent the last month talking about Liz Cheney, talking about having a Republican in her cabinet, talking about a bipartisan advisory commission, claiming she owned a gun. all these things to attract Republicans who are Trumpers. There aren't any Trump hating Republicans. They don't exist. But that's happened because the Democratic Party can't offer its people anything. She raised twice as much as Trump raised. What does that tell you? The Democratic Party is the party of finance capital. Are they going to do anything for the people? No. So all you get is fluff, or, Liz Cheney, or, money to buy a house. So they did this to themselves. I hate to say it. I'm torn a bit. I'm a Green, by the way. I haven't been a Democrat for years. I would prefer a Democrat choosing Supreme Court justices. But they did this. They tell us, you got to vote for us because of the federal judiciary. You got to vote for us because of abortion. And what did we get this year? Biden committing himself to genocide in Gaza. Not caring about the impact it had on his party, not caring about the impact on the person who allegedly he wanted to be his successor. So the Democratic Party is a spent force. Leave it, let it die. That is and I agree with Richard Wolff. We do need a new party, and leftists have to figure out together how best to form a coalition and to make that happen. The Democratic Party is dead, and people need to leave it alone. It's especially difficult for Black people who feel trapped by the duopoly. The Republican is the party of racist white people. And so all we can do is vote to keep Trump and his ilk out of office. That's not all we can do. Get out of the electoral trap. Stop, get out of the cult. And that's all it is now. It's a money laundering operation. It's used to keep people in line. It's used to get our buy-in for things that are horrible. The Democratic Party is dead, and people have to say goodbye, have a funeral, throw dirt on it. I don't care what you do. It's a wrap. And this disaster, this debacle, is because of the Democratic Party elite, these consultants. Where do these people come from? I mean, someone sold her this Liz Cheney thing. Who thought this was going to work? Who thought this was going to get her any votes? So that's where we are now. And the sooner people recognize that the Democratic Party is beyond redemption, the better off we will all be.
Last night,
Joe,
Garland.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Joe. May I jump in on that point?
Yes, please,
Thank
please.
I want to agree with Margaret and say that what we saw yesterday really points to the rottenness and the corruption that is the Democratic National Committee. Every time the DNC tries to force a nominee on the country, that nominee invariably loses, right? They forced Hillary Clinton on us because it was Hillary's turn. They anointed Kamala Harris just because they either couldn't or wouldn't push Joe Biden out in time, and she lost. And not only did she lose, but she lost the popular vote by more than 5 million so far. At least Hillary Clinton won a plurality of the votes. Kamala Harris couldn't even say that. Margaret's exactly right. I don't know how to go about it, but we really do need a viable third party, or a viable third and a viable fourth party, if people are going to be really represented here. And this whole thing about Liz Cheney, Margaret, I'm so glad to hear you say this, because I was afraid that perhaps I was the only person who said parading around with Liz Cheney is not a brag. This is not something that the Democrats should be proud of. We should be shunning people like Liz Cheney. And another thing, too, one final point I wanted to make. I saw some numbers today that were absolutely amazing. In Lansing, Michigan, in Dearborn, Michigan, Jill Stein won 22% to Kamala Harris's 27%. Donald Trump won 48%. Now, if that doesn't scream Gaza to every Democratic voter, at least in the state of Michigan, I would hope nationally, then the Democratic Party is even in worse condition than we thought it was.
Margaret, before I'm going to go to Elizabeth because she had said anything, and I want you, John, to answer Patrick's question as well. But Margaret, the last night I was on a live stream with Garland Nixon, and he said that there's a game changer here in terms of the black vote. The Democrats can no longer depend on it like they have. Do you agree with that or not?
Sort of. I think the biggest problem she had was people who stayed home. I don't see. I think you're going to still see about 10, maybe 12% of Black people voting for Republicans, but the rest remaining overwhelmingly Democratic. But are they going to turn out? And the answer is not always. And you can't treat people like they're stupid. You can't have Barack Obama scolding Black men and accusing them of being misogynist. I mean, these old presidents, they need to him and Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton went to Michigan and said the Palestinians ought to be killed, basically, is what he said. So I don't see that the allegiance of Black people not changing. What is going to change is the willingness of people to be treated like fools, to be for anyone to assume they can talk to them any way they want, they can offer them up any BS that they like, and they can still get a big turnout. That day is gone. It's not going to happen. It happened with Obama twice, but they went, you can't keep going back to that well. It's all dried up. So I would agree with him in that way.
Patrick, can you repeat your question to John Kiriakou? If you remember.
Well,
I don't remember.
I'll pull us back to matters on the foreign side. We were talking about who Trump would gather around him. Okay. John, I got the impression John might disagree with me. My impression during the Trump years was that he did not choose a lot of these people. They were imposed upon him. If I'm wrong about that, I'd be interested to know. I will not go through life with this misimpression, right? But beyond that, Vance is, whatever one thinks of a dynamic presence. I wonder what he might, what influence he might have, in John's view, on Trump's ability to gather people around him who have something to do with what he wants to get done.
I actually agree with you, Patrick, about the notion that many of these people were imposed on Trump. I think if Trump had really been the one making the calls, we would never have seen the likes of John Bolton anywhere near the White House, let alone running foreign and intelligence policy. We would have never seen the promotion of Mike Pompeo, who was just as murderous as any other CIA director, and then promoted to Secretary of State. And frankly, his laundry list of, what was it, 4, maybe 5 White House chiefs of staff were either generals or mainstream right-wing members of Congress. So yeah. I think you're right. I think that the party or the Republican swells convinced him that on some of these personnel matters, they knew better than he did. And that's why we saw people who just were not fits when compared to the rhetoric that we were hearing from Donald Trump. J.D. Vance, I think, is a neophyte. He's only been a senator for 2 years. He really doesn't know Washington. He's not well connected. He's not even universally popular within the Republican Party. Remember, Lindsey Graham practically waged war against that nomination. And Trump made the nomination made the pick only because he had been encouraged to do so by Elon Musk, Don Trump Jr., and Tucker Carlson. And so I think that, I expect J.D. Vance to sort of sit quietly, learn the lay of the land, and then in 4 years say that he is the logical choice to be the one and only successor to Donald Trump. but I don't think we're going to
He's
hear
got-
much from him in the next several years.
Yeah, he's got youth, you know, he can
Yes,
appear
he
in
can be schooled.
28, he's still in his
Mhm.
40s, right?
Mhm.
But I want to mention one thing, John. I just heard before we came on, I haven't verified this. My other half told me, apparently Pompeo has spent a considerable amount of time at Mar-a-Lago in just the last few days. So we better watch this space, right?
Wow, right.
I mean,
Yes.
okay, maybe he's playing golf, but
Campaigned with him. He campaigned with Trump
He
in the
did.
last
Yes, he
week.
did.
If I
He
might,
did.
he had didn't Pompeo come to one of his last rallies? I mean,
Yes.
why wouldn't he go back to the well? Why wouldn't he choose as Secretary
Man.
of State someone he already worked with and he already wants? So that wouldn't surprise me at all. But on the rest of the foreign policy team, you know, how much choice does the fact that he chose Bolton that last time, somebody told him you got to pick Bolton, and ultimately it didn't work out. But I think on the economy, on foreign policy, there are people pulling the strings. We don't know, or maybe we do know who they are. So, for example, on Ukraine, stop giving money to Ukraine. No, no, no. Who cuts the deal with the Republicans to make sure that last tranche of money went through? It was Trump. So it isn't clear. I think that's his political inclination, not to want to spend money there, to make the other NATO nations spend more money. But there are powerful people who tell him what to do as well. Presidents get told what to do. And so we will find out who they are very shortly. My biggest question is about Palestine. He's apparently told Netanyahu, you got to finish the job. What does that mean? You got to kill, if you want to kill people, you got to do it between now and January 20th. Does that mean more dead people? I don't know. But those are my thoughts about these foreign policy advisor questions.
Well, we want to welcome Niko House here, and Elizabeth, now can you take over?
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to start with you, Patrick, and just go back to this article you wrote right before the election about the chaos, the portents of chaos that were encroaching. And I wondered in the wake of the election results, whether you thought there would be a return to like a Russiagate 2.0 type situation. Do you think that the Democrats are going to cry foul, or do you think that the results were too big to rig? Do you think that there may be some attempt at some sort of investigation again, or is it just going to be basically MSNBC shouting about Russia, but with no teeth for the next 4 years?
You know, as we said at the start, I was taken by surprise as much as anyone else. I like the phrase "too big to rig," right? It struck me soon enough that the numbers were just, they were runaway numbers. That you can't fiddle with computers to the extent that you can reverse a result like that. That's my impression now. But again, he declared victory less than 24 hours ago. I suppose we need to wait and see, right? But reading these pitiful liberals, they're all crying in their beer at the moment and trying to figure out how they can lay off responsibility for this, right? The reality is they put up a candidate who is just pitifully, grossly incompetent, right? And you have to step back and say, is that the best they can produce at this point? What is wrong with this picture, right? So, you know, I'm not a domestic caller of things, but I really don't see that there's a lot of room for major disputes, sort of 2020 magnitude things. But, you know, I could be wrong, right? I want to make one other point. We're here, all of us gathered to discuss a new president and what it might portend. I think we need to remind ourselves and those watching us that I've been going over this in my mind. I would say at least since Reagan, there has been a tendency for the national security state to prefer, Dorothy Parker was once asked what sort of men she likes, and she said, "I like him tall, dark, and not too smart." Right? Well, that's I think that's become the national security state's preference, right? George W. Presentable. What did they call Reagan? The great communicator. There's a subtext there, right? And just a little further, in my view, I think the national security state was 15 years old on November 22nd, 1963, and they basically announced then, we're running this now. Do you understand? Right? Jeff Sachs put me onto this interview Putin gave to Le Figaro in 2017. Very interesting. Trump was president at the time. And he said, American presidents, they come and they talk to me, and sometimes they have good ideas, but it doesn't really matter because they return to Washington, this is his phrase, and then the men in the dark suits and the blue neckties appear and tell him how it's going to be. And that's the end of all the good ideas, right? That's the gist of Putin's remark. I think we need to remind ourselves how much any president can do. And again, I'm struck that the stupidity of Kamala Harris takes the breath away. And I think that was her appeal, right? To not to voters, but to those who don't want interference as they run the show, right? Those are my thoughts.
That makes complete sense to me. I also wanted to bring up something we haven't discussed quite yet, and that is the astounding numbers amongst likely voters that we saw since June in support of ceasefire in Gaza, in support of an arms embargo against Israel. And these were voters that would have been for Kamala Harris, that they would have been more likely to vote for her if she had supported those policies. It seems the Democrats obviously completely ignored that, did not choose to make any sort of policy decisions based on those numbers. And I wanted to ask, open up to any of you to discuss what it means exactly that the Democrats cared far more about pleasing Israel than they did about actually appealing to their own base.
Let me go in quickly, okay? Can I go
Sure.
quickly? I was very struck when the good people of Dearborn last spring started raising their voices. The Democratic Party they were quietly but very obviously quite shocked. What? These people are raising their voices as we proceed, right? I'm going to write a column for Joe at some point called Imperial Distance. That's what we're talking about. It's a kind of arrogance. It's a kind of impudence. And if some good things are going to come out of this election, it may be that people are beginning to learn how to be heard.
Yeah, because it's not only the Palestinian lives that the Democrats felt were less important than AIPAC. It was also by losing to Trump every single thing that they said themselves that they were risking losing. It's everyone's rights that they pretend to care about, that they were willing to sacrifice on the altar of Israel. Go ahead, Niko.
I was just want to say that it's insane to me that in an election where they had just gotten done successfully painting Trump as the boogeyman of all boogeymen, and you got Joe Biden, who is decrepit and demented, into office because of it. So now you have an opportunity to not only take back the House, but increase your numbers in the Senate and even maybe take some gubernatorial elections, because you are running against this man that y'all painted as a boogeyman successfully. And you threw it all away because AIPAC told you to take a knee effectively this election. Because the way that Kamala was arguing over this with Palestinian protesters in Detroit, Michigan, literally she was like, "Oh, if you want Trump to win, just say that. Otherwise, let me speak." Well, they voted for Trump. So they're just like, we don't want to make a liar out of you, I guess. So we're going to let you, we're going to vote for Trump, because that's what they literally did. So these are people who may not have necessarily voted for Kamala, but maybe they vote for Joe Stein. I don't know. Maybe they don't vote at all. We don't know how they would have voted. Maybe they do vote for Kamala. But there were so many Arab Americans that literally voted for Trump and she got thrashed in Michigan. That is no small feat, ladies and gentlemen. Usually if a Democrat does get beat in Michigan, it's 50,000 voters or something like that. No, she got thrashed because they wanted to make a point that we will not reward genocide. And these are the same Arab Americans that held Trump accountable for what he did in the Middle East during his 4 years and voted against him last election. So these people didn't make a selfish vote. And I know people keep thinking that it's somehow selfish for these Arab Americans and these Muslim Americans to vote because of Palestine, but it's the most selfless act, because those fears that they had from a Trump presidency did not dissipate. It just meant that, like, I can deal with the level of discomfort that could come from a Trump presidency for 4 years, but what I will not do is reward a genocide just because I don't have those bombs currently falling on my homes, because it could just as easily have been me if I didn't have the opportunities that I've been provided so far. So I think that, like, AIPAC being able to demand that the Democrats take a knee shows you just how much influence these Zionists in Israel have over our government. If there's any government or country that the U.S. should be worried about as far as election interference is concerned, it's obvious who it is, and it isn't Russia.
Here, here. Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to mention was that it seems to me, and I didn't know, Margaret, if maybe you had thoughts on this, that maybe the Democrats also themselves, maybe not their constituents, but the Democratic Party may benefit from being in the position of at least apparent opposition for 4 years, where they are not the ones being held accountable for genocide. They're not the ones being looked to enact an arms embargo. What do you make of that?
Well, things change. So Obama wins big in 2008, but then Trump wins big in 2016. So it's possible for them to bounce back. But my argument is that that's not good enough anymore. That if we only nominate so-and-so, and then maybe we can replicate that again, it's still nonsense. It's still the same BS. And they agree on having a defense budget that's more than $800 billion. They agree about that. Maybe Republicans push through a tax cut for the rich, but the Democrats get in. Do they do anything about it? Did they codify Roe v. Wade? All that talk about abortion rights? No. So it's possible for Democrats to bounce back, but I'm telling Democrats, you need to stop. Stop being Democrats. Let that party die, and let's talk about, and breaking up is hard to do. It's not something that'll happen fast. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, but the first step ought to be goodbye and good luck. I'm doing something else. And I really hope that's what Democratic voters do.
I don't see how they recover, because there's a factor that people don't really consider when talking about these election cycles. Well, I guess there's two. We didn't have like this public record of the election cycle that we've had because of the era of social media and information that we've had over the last 12 to 14 years. So it's like now we watched Obama's image kind of flip in a way that I've never expected to ever see happen, because we have the benefit of hindsight and social media to put things into perspective when it comes to the policies that he was responsible for, especially overseas. So the Democrats now have to deal with a bunch of progressives, that the people that may have been able to lead the party or at least be popular enough to be fundraisers for the party, they endorsed genocide and didn't get a single benefit from it. I don't know how you go forward with that. Second of all, everybody from the brand of the Democratic Leadership Council, the Bill Clintons of the world, the Nancy Pelosi's, Joe Biden's, Hillary, all of them are done. There's nobody left. And they created, this is why I believe, because I believe in election rigging. I'm not naive enough to believe that our elections are legitimate, at least 100% legitimate at the federal level. We've just seen too much evidence to prove otherwise. However, if you're going to have the most unpopular VP ever beat the most popular incumbent president ever, you need to rig on a unified front. So what I feel like we learned is that the Democrats are not unified. They may have looked like they were unified behind Kamala, but in actuality, she looked like bait in shark-infested waters. Because why does she get to be president? She can't even sit down for an interview. She had to get handpicked to be VP. She didn't win this nomination. What makes her better than me? So all those Democrats who are seeing the power vacuum that is impending are looking at Kamala like bait, like, why does she deserve this and I don't? So yeah, in front of the cameras, on social media, they support her. But in reality, they're looking at their next opportunity because there are no power brokers left to, one, uplift them into power like a Joe Biden or Bill Clinton or an Obama could, but also keep them from accountability, protect them from accountability for the actions and the corruption that they participated in on behalf of the Democratic Party and the military-industrial complex. And when you don't have both of those factors working in your favor, then you're not really going to get the Democratic Party to get behind you on a unified front, and they'll lose every time.
What do you think about moving forward? I heard one journalist, Kit Clarenberg, over on X, formerly Twitter, talk about the proposition that, you know, maybe one influence on the election on support for Trump from what we call, you know, the military industrial complex and or the deep state or national security structure, that Trump may be more palatable to them because they are losing the ability to really continue supporting Ukraine in its war with Russia, and that they're kind of okay with having a way out if Trump does decide to withdraw from that conflict. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have some. We are that war is lost, and it's been lost for quite some time. Forgive me, Niko. I'll be done in a sec.
No, you're fine. You're probably fine.
And the interesting thing is to read the mainstream dailies now. Of course, you don't read them for what's going on. You read them for what you're supposed to think is going on. But they are now introducing us to the reality of defeat, right? So Trump, I'll end it in 24 hours. I wouldn't hold your breath on that. But his idea to end it, I think, it's not so hostile to the Orthodox view at this point. Everybody knows it's over, right?
Yeah, so I agree with that, but so here's the only problem with that. So I've had this theory for a while now that part of the reason that the deep state, or whatever you want to call it, has actually been putting an insane amount of money and effort into maintaining this losing war, because like it's obvious, even to the point where they're taking it into Russia. It's like, I don't know what you thought was going to happen when you did that, but it's like worse now than it was before. I feel like part of the reason is because Russia does not like Israel. Netanyahu has actually criticized what Israel has done. Not Netanyahu. Putin has criticized how Israel has dealt with this Gaza situation. Putin and Russia personally invited Palestine into BRICS. And once that transition is made official next year, they will be under the protection of BRICS. If Russia is not being, if they don't have one hand tied behind their back fighting against Ukraine, they are now free to unite their brothers and sisters in the region against Israel with the full might of Russia. And there might not be an Israel after that, because even the Russian Israelis are in support of Putin doing something to bring about a ceasefire in the region, to bring about peace in the region, because at the end of the day, they don't want to see Israel destroyed. And that's kind of what will happen if they continue on the path they're on. This war path that they're on is not winnable, but it will end a lot faster and a lot more violently if Palestine joins BRICS, Russia and Ukraine end their war, and Russia is free to fight alongside Iran, Syria, and Lebanon in the region.
I'd be very, very careful about your expectations that Russia will get involved militarily as you propose. I don't think it's. I don't think
I think it's realistic because they're already involved militarily in Syria. I mean, Russia has been protecting the liberation movement in Burkina Faso because they've all of a sudden become they become more militarily committed to protecting these anti-NATO spaces because it's beneficial for their survival. And they're realizing a lot, and I feel like a lot of countries are realizing Israel's actions are antithetical to the survival of the modern world because they're like, we're going to end up in a nuclear war with the way Israel's behaving. So it's not necessarily even about exclusively the protection of Palestine. It's Russia and Putin specifically because he doesn't have that much time left in office just because of age. He wants to ensure Russia's survival. Israel is antithetical to that goal. And if he has to go through Israel, just like he went through Ukraine to do so, I think that he will do that now because they've already greenlighted it with, like NATO and Israel themselves have greenlighted it with all of the nonsense they've participated in over the last several years.
I don't think Russia would intervene even to save Iran to avoid a nuclear confrontation. That's my view anyway.
Me too, Joe.
Speaking of Israel as well, how do you think Israel is going to react to this? Do you think they're going to escalate their violence in Gaza and elsewhere between now and inauguration, knowing that it's basically a free-for-all? I mean, obviously they would be pleased, I imagine, with a Trump presidency. He's extremely supportive of Israel. Your thoughts?
This is what one hears, Elizabeth. Between now and the inauguration, there'll be a sprint. I'm not sure I get the point of that argument. Even a Harris presidency, she made it quite plain. She had absolutely no intention of altering the Biden administration policy toward Israel. And even if she did have such an intention, she wouldn't be able to do anything about it. And now we have Trump. I assume others present, our viewers, understand his rather vigorous support for Israel. So I don't really quite get the idea that that there's any reason for the Netanyahu regime to race to get things done before January 20th. One other point I want to make: there's a lot of concern, understandable. Goodness gracious, Trump is going to make Gaza and Lebanon worse, right? There are reasons to think about that, but I'm not sure I enter upon that thought either. I really don't see President-elect Trump and then President Trump forcing Netanyahu's hand to speed up, slow down, do anything else differently, right? Netanyahu is very bent on a certain course, a certain pace. He wants American support, but in a day-to-day way, his task is to maintain that support and not tip over with some egregious event, right? And there's been no event sufficiently egregious so far to alter American policy one iota, right? So come January 20th, Trump is president again. I'm not quite sure what's going to change, right?
I think the only incentive that Netanyahu would have for ramping things up is like just the unpredictability of Trump. I feel like that's a legitimate thing because I mean this is the same Trump who was like, I'm gonna bomb the hell out of North Korea, and then next thing you know, him and Kim Jong-un are best friends, and North Korea and South Korea having the best relationship they've ever had since I've been alive. So there's a level of unpredictability to Trump that poses a threat to Netanyahu that where there was a level of predictability with Kamala. I mean, it was, like I said, it was almost strange to the point she was saying she was going to support Israel. Like she was almost like proudly saying, if I had to lose to maintain my support for Israel, I'll keep doing it. Like, I don't care.
Niko,
But
I'm going
what's
to
up?
walk out there on this one. Trump's record on Israel makes his policy toward Tel Aviv, or Jerusalem as he has it, perfectly predictable. I'm out there for that one.
I would only say, I mean, you can't get any worse than genocide. I mean, are you going to genocide more people? It's like we can't Gaza destroyed. So it's at this point, the only thing that Trump could do is interrupt funding, bring attention to things, because it's not necessarily that it would even be against Israel. It could be bringing attention to something Israel is doing that there was not supposed to be attention called to that thing because it could unite the international community behind him. It's not, like I said, with Trump's predictability or lack thereof is a problem, because even when he's trying to like do something that you would think he thinks is beneficial for you, it's actually just chaotic. And
he says the quiet
actually,
part out loud.
huh?
He says the quiet part out loud. He says instead of apologizing and saying that he cares about Palestinians, he makes it very clear that he does not at all and is very brash about the entire agenda.
Like, he could take it to another level, because at least by the end of Joe Biden's presidency, he's been like kind of openly criticizing some of Netanyahu's policies in Gaza, even though he's not doing anything about it, but at least he's openly criticizing it. But Trump adds an element of, now when he's criticizing it, well, we don't have to worry about Kamala winning anymore. All of a sudden, all these liberals and everybody cares about Palestine again, and all eyes would be on Netanyahu again instead of the election, and all eyes would be on Trump, which that could just create, we don't know what can happen. That's just because Trump is unpredictable, and Netanyahu will have to react based off of how Trump reacts, because they can't fund this war without the United States. If the United States stopped funding it, they would have to stop fighting in 2 or 3 months. So they can't fund the war without the United States. They'll have to react based off how Trump reacts, and Trump is unpredictable. So I could see them ramping up operations in the next 2 months just because of that unpredictability. Not because they won't see him as an ally, but just the unpredictability.
Or at least because they know there's no repercussions at the very, very least. I want to go back briefly to the beginning of our discussion a little bit, where we just mentioned the huge numbers that Trump saw in this election outcome. And it's not just Trump versus Kamala, where Republicans had a pretty significant gain in the election last night. It was Republicans in general. So I think, although we've discussed the election, the presidential election, obviously is a personality contest, and it's, as Joe mentioned, it's much more that way in America than it is in other countries. But this was also repudiation of the Democratic Party across the board, not just Kamala. And I wanted to, get your thoughts on that before I hand things back to Joe.
Me specifically?
Yeah.
I mean, I 100% agree. Everybody keeps talking about sexism, racism, X, Y, and Z, and this is a Nazi, this person. I'm like, was it sexism that gave the Republicans the Senate? Was it sexism that helped them win every incumbency, like gubernatorial incumbency that they ran in, like, and not by a little bit, by a lot, in every single election? Is it y'all didn't get any seats back in the House and you lost one? Is that all? And what's even crazier, so in Missouri, for example, Josh Hawley won again by a significant margin, but somehow in that same election, the ballot initiatives of marijuana, legalization of marijuana, increased minimum wage, for the 3rd time, by the way, in Missouri, and pro-abortion, pro-choice laws got passed. So those conservatives that voted for Josh Hawley literally passed a bunch of populist leftist policies, which doesn't really make sense if you're looking at it from the perspective of Democrats, which is by some of their logic that they move too far left. No, the problem is the world doesn't believe that you're to the left of the Republicans anymore. They literally know, based off what we've seen, y'all are to the right of the Republicans now. And y'all can say whatever y'all want to as far as identity and that type of stuff, but like, even when it comes to identity, it's fake identity politics. It's this fake investment, emotional investment, because the moment that they lost, you started seeing tweets like, oh, I hope Trump bombs Paz. I hope that he sends those Latinos back to where they came from. So it's like, hold up, I thought that y'all wanted him to win because otherwise this would be the conclusion, because you were genuinely worried about their livelihood. But in actuality, you didn't really ever care. You only wanted to use them as a means to an end. That is the definition of the Democratic Party. That is who they are. And everybody is tired of it. It is not just about necessarily even the Democratic Party. It was almost like a staunch rebuke of the system and anything that resembles it based on the personal experiences of the individual. And unfortunately, right now for the Democrats, everything about them is representative of the system, even the way that they weaponize the system against people who don't have the power to fight back, or are in a compromised position, like with Trump, how they weaponized the justice system against Trump. They had all these legitimate ways to go after him, but they couldn't do that because he was guilty of the things that Joe Biden's guilty of in that regard. So they're like, but we gotta invent something. We got to make up some things. And they weaponized the justice system against a political opponent in the way that they claimed Trump was doing against Joe Biden. And I'm like, everybody was like, yo, what? That's like how the system is used against me. Everything this election, every vote, I would say even a little bit more than half, I would say, were more so votes cast as a rebuke of the system as it currently stands, more than support for Trump.
Yeah, and every time Trump is targeted by the media or by the justice system or whatever emblem of the establishment, it helps him retain and create that sense of his character as being anti-establishment, as being against the system, and all of those things. And I definitely think that, with the economy the way it is, and people suffering the way they are, and Democrats seeming to be so deaf to that and out of touch with that in real terms, when you see Kamala Harris saying things like, oh yeah, well, I care about Gaza. I'm sure lots of people care about Gaza, but we care about our grocery bills too. Like using it as a weapon against people to make them vote for her, as opposed to any type of actual empathy or policy that would actually help those people. I do think that probably a lot of people did vote for Trump just as a way to throw the middle finger to the system in the only way they knew how, even if it doesn't ultimately benefit them. So
yeah, I 100% agree. I think that it was with the we care about Palestine, but what about this other issue? It's like, hold on. Go back. You can't say we care about genocide, but there is no but after that. It's we care about genocide, and this is what we're going to do to prevent it from happening or prevent it from being taken any further. But it was literally, like you said, it was like we care about genocide, but no, that's not really one of those but issues. We should, I don't know how you can't get worse than that.
Your groceries and your reproductive rights are a ransom to continue this genocide. And
well,
also we have no policies to change any of that.
And how disconnected they are when they kept saying, we're not going to go back. Okay, I just need y'all to remember, shit was cheaper 3 years ago. Like, regardless of who or why, it was cheaper. There was no genocide, and Ukrainians weren't being sent to a meat grinder. Like, arguably, maybe some people want to go back. Maybe they don't like paying $3.50 for gas. Like, maybe they want to go back to when they were, like, when I left Miami, my rent had jumped up $500 or $600 in 2 years. It was insane. I've never seen anything like it. And I've heard it's only gotten worse since then. Maybe some people want to go back. And your association of what going back is, you're assuming what the country believes going back would look like. You think that everybody feels like the world around them is racist, sexist, bigoted. Not like the average American is just trying to go to work, come home, spend time with their family, go to sleep, and do the same thing again tomorrow with little problems and interruptions as possible in their lives. That's the average American. Are they racist? Yes. But a lot of them are liberal, so that don't even really matter, okay? Like, not everybody that votes for Trump is not. No, the majority of people who vote for Trump are not Nazis or racist. And I can't necessarily say that the majority of people that vote for Kamala aren't racist to some degree, because what we've seen, if you saw that video where those Democrats were walking into the convention and people were shouting out the names of those Palestinian children who have died, and the way that they reacted, I could not believe it, even still to this day. And I saw the video again. And I was like, where is that video of Trump supporters? Because there was a video where Charlie Kirk was challenged at a Trump rally because of his Zionism. And the crowd turned on Charlie Kirk. That's crazy. Like, when you think about it from the perspective of, the Democrats are supposed to be the party of empathy. They're supposed to be the party of the working class, for the downtrodden. And yet I can't find the video of a bunch of MAGA people basically giving the middle finger to dead Palestinian children. They will literally excommunicate Zionists. If they find out you're a Zionist and you're Israel first or whatever, they're like, no, you're bad for America first. You're bad for Trump. It's your advice that is throwing him off and making matters worse in the region. Like, but you won't see that type of pushback, like from the Van Jones of the world. Whenever you heard Kamala say, like, shut up, basically, in Detroit, Michigan, which is insane, that you need to win. There's been no Democrat since, well, I believe maybe Bill Clinton that has won without Michigan. None. And you were like, yeah, shut up and let me talk. You would think that just to save face of Van Jones, any of those type of guys would come out like, hey, man, look, I know we want her to win, but we can't just disregard and delegitimize their very legitimate concerns of genocide happening in Palestine. Like, maintain some type of, like, just maintain face. Nope, they just ignored it. And so, okay, you're getting the results of that.
Because they are too afraid of losing their AIPAC donors. They're too afraid of that interest group and offending them in any way at all. I also think that when I'm looking at the reaction to all of this with the election results, when I see, I think something that's very emblematic of that disconnect between a lot of the Democratic Party establishment and the rest of the country that voted against the Democratic Party is the sense that you wake up this morning and suddenly they're devastated and they can't believe that humanity did this to them. And, oh my God, they're suffering and they're crying. Where were they 3 days ago when children were being burned alive in Gaza? They didn't care about that. So there's selective empathy.
The day of. It happened literally the day of.
All of it. So where is that empathy for anyone but themselves and their own interests? It doesn't seem to exist. And I think that disconnect extends also to people suffering in the middle of America who they don't see, they don't care about, and they don't even believe will vote. And they were wrong. They were wrong.
And then they demand that you feel as bad for them as they feel for themselves. We're like, hold on, but I have that empathy for Gazans, and y'all were upset at me about it before this election. And now you're like, why don't you have that empathy for me? Because I might eventually suffer from a problem that Trump might cause. I mean, not now, but it could happen. It's like, well, they're dying right now. Yeah, but what about me? It's the most American shit ever. That's the only way I could think of to put it. It is the most American shit ever.
Patrick, do you have any thoughts you want to share on any of this?
Well, listening to this, yeah, you know, a thought that's been rattling around in my mind and many other minds for a while now. It is quite remarkable. Remember, I'm overseas at the moment. It is quite remarkable to watch from a distance. I'm thinking of two things. One, events of, as Joe puts it, world historical magnitude. Americans are offered no choice. I understand Jill Stein and Cornel West and all that, but the mainstream parties offered no choice, right?
The system offered no choice.
Empire was not debated, right? There was no debate about empire, right? I think it's Caitlin Johnstone who said, the remarkable thing about America is it runs this huge empire and Americans can't actually see it, right? That's one point. The second is the extraordinary insulation of American people. I don't say that critically. I say it more in the way of observation. From events, from world events, it doesn't enter into people's minds. Now, I take your point, Niko, about Gaza. That was certainly on a lot of people's minds, right? I wonder the extent to which it tipped the election. I'd be interested to know that. But broadly speaking, the out of touchness of Americans to global events is really quite striking. I think there are reasons for that, political reasons, historical reasons, conditioning. It's a sort of questions of social psychology and all that, right? Propaganda. But the reality is, it's quite striking to observe that, especially if you're walking around in Europe, and what's on people's minds, are things that ought to be on people's minds, right? Forgive me for going on a little bit. I'm going to sign out in a short time, but I wanted to say those things.
I think that I agree, and I think that's partially because they don't have the time or the energy or the effort or the money to worry about it, because they're so worried about what they call the kitchen table or dinner table issues, which is by design, right? I feel like we all know that.
I understand, but Niko, this is part of what I'm saying, right? There's the private self and there's the civic self, right? It's quite striking the extent to which the civic self among Americans, that you vote every 4 years, and you vote every 4 years, and what's for dinner, right? That's it.
It's scary because of how much access to information they have.
When you're around other people, you can, it kind of puts these aspects of American life into some perspective,
Yeah. I live in Brazil, right? And they're unaware of a lot of foreign policy, but it's partially because of some of the stuff that happens here economically. But also it's because Brazil isn't as involved in their minds. The foreign policy world doesn't affect them. Well, personally, Brazil's foreign policy actions in the rest of the world don't affect them as much. But they're all willing to have a conversation. If they hear something bad is happening, it's just bad. They don't debate about it. Like if they find, like when they found out Lula, for example, denied Maduro the opportunity to be a part of BRICS, and Venezuela the opportunity to be a part of BRICS. And that's a whole different conversation. But they were pissed. They're like, well, hold on, what? Yeah, we've all had a great relationship with them. What's the problem? Like,
you make my point. You make my point.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. It's striking how Americans have all this access to so much information, more than what most of these third world countries, these developing countries could ever hope to ask for. And yet with all that access, like you said, there's still like this cynical approach to the point. Like you said, like if you get around other people, like if you're in America and you're afraid to broach certain conversations. Like we shouldn't really be afraid to have a conversation about whether or not genocide is bad. Like I think that should be the conversation should be what we should do about it. But people are even afraid to mention genocide because somehow that will be linked to who are you voting for then, Kamala or Trump? And then the conversation becomes whether or not you're a Nazi. And now I just lost a friend. That's insanity. And it's because they're so ignorant of what's going on out in the rest of the world. But I will say, I feel like that gap is closing, and it's not necessarily by choice. It's because they're beginning to realize, hold on, when this Ukraine war started and this Israel situation started, all my bills went up. I don't know how that math works, but we need to do something about it. So I feel like that's starting to happen more and more, not by choice, but by necessity.
And I think too, to agree with both of your points that line up very well, I think that it was Caitlin Johnstone, again, to bring her up, to invoke Caitlin, that she's the one that has pointed out over and over and over again that she feels that U.S. citizens are the most propagandized in the world, and that has huge repercussions.
Yeah.
100%.
And I think as part of that, I think as well, I think that's a big explanation for why people's emotions only seem to awaken. Their sense of hurt and empathy only really turns on when it comes to the things that the moral influencers and the herd to kind of tell them to care about. We care about the fact that Kamala lost because, oh my God, it's a moral tragedy. But when we talk about Gaza, we really don't want to talk about that as any type of moral tragedy because we're just kind of not encouraged to think about it. We're encouraged actually to do the exact opposite. It's amazing to watch that unfold.
There's also a level of disassociation because you don't want to, a lot of Americans don't want to, first of all, Americans have a lot of problems with accepting self-responsibility and being accountable for themselves. That's like already a general problem in the country. Now, imagine you feel responsible for the genocide of a group of people because of your negligence, because of your ignorance, because of how you voted, because of how you didn't vote, because of how you were just unaware, right? Americans don't like to feel culpable for anything. We also like to feel like we're not we, but just Americans in general like to feel like they're the best at everything. They also like to feel like they are the savior of the world, the police of the world. And they definitely don't want to believe that they are the worst thing that could have happened to the world. And that you're living in a society with access to all this technology and all these resources as a benefit from the damage that we've done to other countries. That is a lot to drink. That's a lot of Kool-Aid to drink in a short period of time. And for a lot of people, including myself, that was something I had to accept over time, because I'm a person that's pretty self-aware, and even having that bubble burst for me, I was up for weeks, sleepless, because I'm like, this is crazy. I can't believe how ignorant I was. Like, what about everybody else? How are we going to talk about this? Because I mean, I was willing to hear it, but I know that other people aren't. And you kind of go down that rabbit hole, and it's just a rabbit hole a lot of Americans aren't really willing to accept or deal with.
Patrick, do you have to leave?
Yeah, I gotta be on my way.
Can I ask you 2 quick questions?
Please.
One, do you think Trump this time will release the JFK records?
Wow. We go back to the question of the national security state. I think he would be inclined to, but Donald Trump's inclinations only take you so far. I don't know Washington the way you know it, Joe, right? But
know it very well either.
from a distance, I have a hard time imagining elements in the national security apparatus would let that happen. You know,
I asked John Kiriakou in a message after he left us, and his response was Bobby Kennedy told him a few years ago that he thought somebody had gotten to Trump, and he doesn't think they'll ever be released. And he told John that in a podcast, so I could reveal that publicly. He also said he can't imagine, even with Bobby Kennedy in Trump's administration in some role, that would influence him getting those documents released. That's what. Yes,
I've heard the same thing from people close to Bobby. I've heard the same thing. He said the same thing to one of his best friends. Like, it's not happening.
Yeah,
but he could work on him now. He could work on Trump. Hopefully, he's close to him. Anyway,
I think the thing we should recognize now is it's borderline common knowledge. It's now out there. Oliver Stone and David Talbot and all these others. It's clear. It's known what happened. We're getting into the place the French were after the war. Nobody could admit the collaboration. You know, nobody could accept the facts of history, and it becomes a point of national shame. And I think that we're moving into that sort of situation. We can't face that. That's my thought on that one. And I don't.
We're going to learn about aliens on other planets before we'll probably learn.
Yeah.
That's already starting, isn't it?
I feel like there's too much accountability. There'll be that. I mean, that's a shitstorm. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It's because you got to remember, Trump was so adamant about releasing the JFK papers because nobody even brought that up. He was the one who's like, I'm gonna release the JFK papers. And they're like, well, that's
supposed to be released. That was the committee in the House in 72.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying, but when he was campaigning on it, it was like he was choosing to campaign on it. He didn't even have to bring it up. A lot of stuff gets brought up in the House that doesn't get addressed, like the embargo that got continued under Biden. That didn't really get a lot of attention. But like Trump was like campaigning on this, and then when the time came, he was like, yeah, they told me I can't do it. It's basically what he said. It's like, who's they, and what power do they have over you that you felt like you couldn't do it as a president without this backlash being so chaotic?
It's exactly what Judge Napolitano said. I was up here in when I was up here also in Kingston, Napolitano told me, he said that Trump, why didn't he release it? I said, they won't let me. Who's they? Second question, Patrick, so you can leave us, is after this result last night, is Russiagate finally dead? You're the man who really was one of the first, if not the first, who recognized Russiagate way early in during that period.
It's dead so long as it has no use. Okay, it's basically the Russiagate thing was instrumentalized propaganda. Okay, it had a use, it had a purpose. And that column that Elizabeth mentioned earlier, I was quite disturbed. If this is going to be a close election, they're going to trot this out again. At the moment, it has no use. But I don't think we should lose sight of the fact you've made this point. The damage done by those years is very significant, and we are not past it yet. Russiagate started so Hillary Clinton could explain to herself and others why she lost. International relations have been, a lot of damage has been done to international relations because of that, right? And I don't think we're over it yet. Will it come back? Look, the Times, The Times has a disinformation correspondent now, right? Stephen Lee Myers, not coincidentally ex-Moscow bureau, right? They're not going to let the whole disinformation theme run dry. I think I'm quite relieved that the chaos that concerned me prior to the election has not yet come to be. But I think it was plain they were ready to haul that out of the closet once again if it became necessary. Indeed, this morning's Times had a piece to this effect on the front page. I'm
going to read from that article, by the way. It's an extraordinary article. But the reason I say why it died now is because of the mandate Trump received. If it was close, they were going to trot it out again. They can't get away with it this time. So you're right.
Yeah, I agree with you.
They're going to keep it in their holster. They're going to keep it in their holster for sure, but they can't.
Exactly.
They tried it in Georgia.
Yeah.
They tried it in Georgia they said that Russians were calling in false bomb threats to
get
people to crowd the polls. But it didn't hold water.
Anyway,
so I have with me here Gerald Celente, who's going to join us, and Patrick, if you have to run, please go. As far as that Russian thing goes, this is one of Gerald's possessions here, and you can see what it says. That's about the Russians blew up those bombs. So anyway, bye, Patrick. Thanks for joining us. Really,
a pleasure. Cheers.
Okay.
In about 10 minutes, I have to get going too. My baby's screaming.
Well, we got Gerald here to see us through, but you hang on if you can. Things were raised in the house, and we're going to raise in the Niko house as well. But first, we got Gerald here. Gerald, we had a tremendous time last night in his studio upstairs. This is his downstairs studio, lights and everything, and we had 7 hours with Scott Ritter, Garland Nix, and myself, and it was a blast. It was very different than this. This is a more formal, serious interview. That we were drinking wine and swearing and saying things we probably shouldn't have said with over 40,000 people watching live on his channel. All combined, must be 80 or 100,000 now. And I don't want to see it again. I'm hoping not to hear from people. Did you really mean that? So, Gerald, give us your overview, and I want to ask you about Iran, because it was a bit of an argument you had with Scott about this. Trump despises Iran. He ended the Iran deal. He thinks they were stealing money. They should not have given that money back. All this rubbish that Iran is a sponsor of terrorism. We know how close he is to Israel. Netanyahu, who's been wanting the U.S. to go to war against Iran for 20 years because they can't do it on their own. So, Gerald, let's first your general thoughts about the election last night and then about Iran.
Well, first of all, I thought that Harris was going to win. And the reason I thought she was going to win was the same reason why the Republicans didn't do well in the midterm elections. when you look at the midterm elections, Biden's popularity rating was way, way down. And inflation was really very high. They didn't do well because of one reason, and that was anti-abortion. Those are the facts. I mean, the data is all there. So I thought with Harris being, again, it's not what you want, what you like, what you wish for, it just is what is, being pro-abortion, and the data showing that some 67% of Americans were pro-abortion, and Vance and Trump was, I killed Roe versus Wade, and the stupid stuff that Vance said about, women that don't have kids, or here's some stupid thing he said. Cat ladies, yeah. So I thought she was going to win. And the reason I thought she was also going to win, because people only look at one topic. And when you look at the polls coming out about the economy, they weren't that negative, a lot of the polls. And they were much higher in levels than they were a couple of years ago. So I didn't think the economy would be the big issue. And it was. And when you look at the data from abortion, it was like, what about 17, 18% had that as a major issue. So, and then also after she finished, when she got the nomination, she was really popular. And then she beat Trump.
When no one had heard from her till she started talking.
Yeah. Well, then again, she beat Trump at the debates too, and he refused to debate again.
More or less, yeah.
But then, every time she went on a show or anything, she showed how, dumb she was. And so Trump, to me, won because of the people, again, and as that saying goes back in the Clinton administration, it's the economy, stupid. And the average person is really suffering. And Trump has promised all these things, like, I'm even going to cut federal income tax. I'm going to cut taxes for the Social Security. You don't have to pay them, on and on and on. So he really hit it on that. On the global issue, again, we were watching it last night. The numbers came up. What was like 4% of the people?
That's what that said. Yeah,
that's what it said. Only 4% of the people were concerned about the global issues.
That,
but I'm just saying what the polls showed, And now this just came out. This is from Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, which we subscribe to because we want to hear what's going on. Representative Stefanik says new administration, quote, will hold university leaders responsible, end quote, for anti-Semitism on campuses. So anti-Semitism, according to the clown lady here, is if you come out against genocide, you're an anti-Semite. And so I keep making
that's just a return to the norm, right? That hasn't been happening for the last 4 years or the last couple of years. Well, it's already been happening.
Our elite higher education institutions have conceded to hostile and anti-Semitic agitators, failing to condemn students and faculty responsible for spewing Jewish hate on their campuses. We will hold university leaders responsible for allowing this hate to fester, accountable. Stefanik, ready? Is expected to be considered for a cabinet position, with speculation centering around her potential role as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
But that's where they put the dumbest. Isn't that Nikki Haley's old position? That's perfect for her, it sounds like.
Yeah. So how about Madeline Not All That Bright? You remember that one?
Two dumb guys there too, like John Bolton.
Yeah.
They put the dumbest people like in that position. It's actually kind of interesting. It's like you send a bunch of people to go embarrass themselves.
Well, the whole thing is a freak show. So going back to Madeleine Albright, you remember when she's asked on 60 Minutes by Leslie Stahl, is the life of 500,000 Iraqi children that have died because of what Bill Clinton did with the sanctions and the bombings, quote, worth the price? And she said, yes, it is. So that's a UN ambassador.
Yeah.
And then you go, this is now from Haaretz. IDF's destruction of northern Gaza reveals the government's plan, quote, we're here to stay. Trump presidential transition to be held by Howard Lutnick, pro-Israeli advocate and key megadonor. Benjamin Netanyahu calls, this is from Jerusalem Post, Donald Trump's election victory, quote, history's great comeback. And so you have it. Small majority U.S. voters believe support for Israel too strong, exit polls show. 32% they felt the support was too strong. 31% said not strong enough. And 31% replied they felt the support was about right.
That's interesting because there was a poll that came out the other day that said the majority of Americans actually do not support Israel. Like, believes that we're supporting Israel way too much and we need to back off. It was like a massive number.
Poll, you know.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, like, it's my point was going to be, so polls can be very, very deceptive because they're asked at very specific times, and people's emotions and what they've been exposed to as far as whatever given issue that might be at the time, they just waver. So like one day, like you said, during the midterms, it made sense that abortion was such a major issue because Congress could have actually done something to ratify or rectify that issue. They could have codified it if, that's what they believe anyway. They wouldn't have done it, but that's what they believe. There was something that Congress could have done about that issue. When they didn't do it, and then now it's a presidential election, there's more than abortion on the line, and they believe that the president can influence more issues than just abortion. So running on an issue that you ran on during the midterms in the middle of everything else that's going on, right? The economy is far worse than what it was during the midterms. This war.
Not really. No, the economy, no, it's not far worse in the sense that you're looking at inflation isn't what it was during the midterms, but the people are still paying high prices.
Well, so it's higher price, but so also it's like, in my opinion, I guess the lack of opportunity to grow within it is also something I'm factoring in, and the cost of healthcare not going down. My mom's actually just went up recently, like things like that. So yeah, inflation might have gone down a little bit, but like everybody's still paying more and the wages aren't matching. So that's why I feel like the economy is worse. And I feel like everybody's vote yesterday is kind of like example of that. Like, yeah, y'all keep saying it's getting better, but no, it's not. It's actually worse. And that's why, like I said earlier, you weren't here, but I said when they say, oh, we're not going to go back, everybody's idea of going back is not the same, right? Their perception of 3 or 4 years ago is not necessarily the same as what Kamala tried to project it as being. But polls can be a little bit dicey because, like you said, there's a poll that said 30% thought we were Israel, we're too supportive of Israel. But like, I just read a poll the other day that said like it was like 60 or 65% believe that we're too supportive of Israel.
And these are the polls, though. These are the people that left the polls. That's
no, I know, but no, I'm just saying, no, because you were saying that the polls prior to the election were saying certain things about certain issues. So my point is, people are easily swayed on what they believe was the most important thing to them because of the state of how they receive the state of the United States, specifically in the media, and how they receive that information and when it's given to them, right? They're told what to believe. Go ahead.
I also think a major issue is that there's this really anti-woke. They've had enough of this stuff. And when you look at
I think to some degree, there's that. I think there's an anti-token. People are tired of being tokenized. I think that there's that, right? I know for a fact a lot of black.
Also, the green energy is an issue as well. That's another one where Trump said, we're going to pump more oil, we're going to do more of this, electric vehicles. And again, so I think a lot of people are very disgusted with the push toward, this wokeism. And that's why they came out against it as well.
Oh, the wokeism, got you. I don't see.
Also,
okay,
the way the polls are worded, though, also really matters because, like, for example, support Israel is very different to do you support a ceasefire? You may personally believe in supporting Israel, but also want a ceasefire. And so I believe it was back in June, it was something like 60+% of likely voters were polled as supportive of a ceasefire. So I think it really depends on exactly what you're asking.
And the context of which the poll is being asked, because sometimes the questions that make the news are just in the middle of a host of other questions that have nothing to do with that issue. And so, which is a way to get them to answer more honestly on that one issue. It's like, maybe
yes, and I understand, but I'm just saying, what we do is I publish a magazine, the Trends Journal, and what we do is we subscribe to Haaretz. We go all over the world. This is what they're saying. We don't argue about, what they're saying is made up because of the way the poll is done. We're just saying this is what.
No, I'm not talking about what they're saying. I'm only specifically referring to the reason, because you were saying why you thought Kamala was going to win. That's the only thing I'm referring. I'm not addressing all the other stuff. I'm just addressing specifically the belief that Kamala, because I didn't have that belief. I thought the only way that Kamala win was that she would cheat. I mean, she's the most unpopular VP in the world, and or in history, excuse me. And there's nothing that I saw other than maybe that little bit of a victory of a debate, which was actually just a failure for the entire country. Outside of that, every time she got in front of the TV, people disliked her more. And then she went to Dearborn, Michigan.
That's exactly what
everybody
happened.
To vote for Trump if they don't want her to talk, or if they want Trump to win, keep interrupting her. Like, her strategy was horrible. She was never actually put to the test through a primary process to prove that she was the best candidate to run against Trump. And then it was like the Democrats decided to completely ignore the fact that regardless of how he got it or what they think about it, Trump had a movement. And that matters. Like, that matters when you're talking about getting out the vote. We're talking about building a coalition. Last time he increased his voter block against every single demographic except for white guys. And they didn't even think about that. And instead of actually facing the reason as to why there was such a staunch rebuke of the Democratic Party, they instead decided to call everybody Nazis that voted for him and play the blame. I've never heard about Hispanic guys getting mentioned so much in politics until today. They're catching so many strays with the Democratic Party. I've never seen it before, but they're now blaming Hispanic guys for being sexist. Like, that's why they lost.
What are they blaming? What?
The Hispanic guys, Latino men, they're blaming them now, saying that they're sexist, and that's largely why Kamala lost. Okay, then why did y'all lose the Senate? Why did y'all lose another seat in the House? Why did y'all lose gubernatorial elections across the country?
Exactly.
You can't.
I think this is the beginning of the end of the Democratic Party as it is. It's the Obama, all the Biden administration was just Obama 2.0. It was the same people. And she was going to keep the same people in place as well. And you saw all this campaigning that Obama did, and Clinton and all of them out there, and they didn't go anywhere with it. And so I think this is going to be the beginning. Well, the Democratic Party died under Bill Clinton with the new Democratic Party. This is the guy that gave us killed the Glass-Steagall Act, on and on. NAFTA, he became a Republican. I think this might be the beginning of a new Democratic Party. That's a possibility.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I was actually talking about that earlier, how the deals, as you referred to, how they moved to the right while pretending to still be liberal under Clinton. That whole DLC group has already served as president, or they've already lost. There's nobody left. Yep. Joe Biden was the last one. And so there's a power vacuum that needs to be filled, but nobody has the power to fill it, because the Democratic power structure works both two ways. It's how can you give me more power in time? I'm going to say também, sorry, too much Portuguese. And also, how can you shield me from the consequences of me participating in the corruption that the Democratic Party requires? If you can't offer me both of those things, we're not going to unite behind you. They're going to try to race. They're going to race to the top. And
with all due respect, both parties are corrupt.
Of course.
No, but I'm referring specifically to the Democratic, because you said the Democratic Party.
I'm saying, no, I'm just saying, but they're both, it's a crime syndicate, both of them. They're murderers.
Yeah, but in specific respect to the Democratic Party, I'm agreeing with you that it will never be the same, because the structure of power within the Democratic Party, the way that they maintain it, doesn't exist anymore. There's a power vacuum. Right now, the power vacuum in the Republican Party is being maintained by Trump. But when he's gone, I believe there's going to be a power vacuum that they haven't experienced in a long time as well.
Yeah, again, I think that, I'm just saying, I think this might be the beginning of the creation of a different Democratic Party. And they're not going to.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. This is the end of the Obama thing. He went nowhere, and he was out there all the time, and it didn't do anything. And so I think this is going to be, you're going to, a possible shift in a new direction, like not an AOC, but, something like that.
Let me ask you, Gerald.
More populist,
There-
more
there are
populist.
There are two people this morning who could be saying to the Democratic Party, "I told you so." One is Joe Biden, right?
Yeah.
If I stick him there, there's that clip going around on Twitter about the CNN where John King is showing a map that shows where Kamala Harris outperformed Biden in 2020. And the map goes up and it's blank. And what's the other anchor name with the hair last night? He said, wow, are you kidding? Not one county in the whole country? Not one county in the entire United States for Harris outperformed Biden in 2020. Yep. So Biden is saying, I told you so. I was with it. Even in my demented state, I'm better a campaigner than Harris is. And I'm the only one who beat Trump. He could rightly say Hillary lost and she lost, but I beat him because I have the working class Scranton roots, which leads me to the other person who could say, I told you so. I don't know if he is. I doubt it. Is Bernie Sanders, because he could say, you guys stuck with me. We may have won the last one and this one because there are issues that overlap. Trump voters and my voters, even Trump said that. He said that in 2016. I'm really worried about Bernie because he's going after the same people I am. He said that, Trump. So Bernie can say, as Gerald says, the Democratic Party is over in its current iteration. It has to change. Is there a chance that void could be filled with if Bernie or somebody steps up, not AOC, and steps up and says, listen, we had it. And that's the only way we're going to win. We got to get policies that help average Americans or else we are screwed in perpetuity.
And there's no one.
That would require self-awareness. That would require insight into the fact that they themselves lost an election a number of times based on their own policy mistakes. And they'll never do it.
That New York Times article I'm going to read in a moment when you guys give me your answers. You're right. Can they look in the damn mirror finally, the Democrats?
Will AIPAC allow them to? I guess that's the first question.
Yeah. The Greens only got 0.5%. So I don't think you're going to see a move to a third party, unfortunately. I think that it would be better if we just got rid of the Democratic Party altogether and had a different second party or whatever. But I don't see that people are willing to do that. And so you have people still trapped in the Democratic Party, but less enthusiastic about voting for it, which allows them to have these giant losses. But you don't really see a way forward.
Yeah. And even with the Green Party, you can make an argument that they only got that. They only did that poorly because the Democrats screwed them in Ohio, disqualified them last minute in Georgia, changed the rules in New York. And God knows how many votes that was. It makes it. So now the real problem is, how can we be so okay with a system that is so anti-democratic? And we keep rewarding one party or the other for participating in the antithesis of democracy every year and pretending as if they legitimately won when we're only given the illusion of choice.
Well, again, look how much it costs to run for president. About $1 billion each. This is democracy.
Blowing through the money. Jesus.
And look at all the money they got from the billionaires. I mean, it's a crime syndicate, as I said. It's a joke.
I watched this video on TikTok this morning and this guy was so pissed. I thought he was joking, but he was so serious. He said, $400 million. Y'all could have given that to poor people in the community. Y'all could have helped the Black people that y'all swear that y'all want that you're running for office to help. You could have done so much with that money, and y'all threw a concert. He said, y'all threw concerts, y'all threw events, and just blew it up. He's like, y'all are idiots. Y'all are stupid.
Fake concerts where they said that Beyonce would be playing, and then she didn't.
And then she didn't actually perform, but she was paid to be there. He's like, y'all are idiots. Y'all, and it's celebrities too, because so it's y'all have the ability to raise this amount of money in this short amount of time, and then y'all telling us the only way that we can actually benefit from the money as a community is if we vote for who the hell you choose. Why didn't you do this before she was? Why we gotta wait for an election for y'all to do this for us? Why we gotta wait for a natural disaster? And that's the problem. The inherent issue with the United States is that the people who actually have the power to make the change only wait until there's a transactional benefit for them in order for them to put their hat in to the ring. It's ridiculous.
And so on the I think that also, on a positive note, I think that Trump is going to wind down the Ukraine war. On the negative note is going to be what goes on in Israel. And that's going to be the big question. But I think on a positive note, he's not going to keep the the Ukraine war going.
I think that's a possibility. I really think that he don't like losing wars. He doesn't like losing, period. So there are certain situations, like, for example, he had a perfect opportunity. Everybody thinks he's going to go to war with Iran. I don't think so. I just don't believe it because he had his perfect opportunity. Huh?
Yeah. Well, again, when you look what happened with
Go back.
when the
Soleimani?
During the election, he said when Iran attacked, counterattacked,
Israel.
he said they should blow up their oil fields and their nuclear facilities.
Yeah, he'll say that, but I don't really trust what Trump says in a moment.
What he said, so I think that he, considering all the money that he got from the Jewish donors, like $100 million from, Sheldon Adelson's wife, I think that, and Netanyahu again coming out, and one after another, by the way, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, they're all so happy that Trump won. So I think, again, Trump was the one that killed the nuclear deal with Iran, and he killed Soleimani. So I think he has the.
See, I don't believe that he killed Soleimani. I guess that's where. So I don't believe that he killed Soleimani. I don't believe that he greenlighted it. I believe he woke up and found out about it. Like most presidents do.
Not at all. No, I wrote about it as it was happening. He was
I'm gonna give you my logic, because if you actually go back
and watch, you can have your logic. I'm telling you, you can listen to what he said. And
that's what I'm telling you. I'm listening to. I know what he said, but if you listen to his speech to why he justified killing Soleimani, he was rambling, and it sounded like he had no idea who he was talking about. Right?
He rambles all the time.
Huh?
He rambles all the time.
Like last night.
Yeah,
he rambles on and on. He rambles and rambles.
In the case of Soleimani, it was like he was trying to work backwards from a conclusion that had already been drawn for him, because he can't, in front of his base, make it look like he does not have control. If he had control, he would have released the JFK papers. If he had control, he would have pardoned Julian Assange like he promised. If he had control, he might have even arrested Hillary Clinton like he said he was going to arrest. But he doesn't actually have control.
He has control. No, again,
no. You're giving him way too much credit. He does not have that kind of control.
Look, that's your take. Let me.
No, I'm being no, because we know where Trump literally said he was gonna. He said that he said that, or he wanted to make good relations, surprisingly, with North Korea. The whole country in the military-industrial complex tried to punish him for it. He said he's going to pull out Afghanistan. You're going on two different
directions.
No, I'm not going in two different. No, I'm not going in two different directions. I'm trying to explain to you.
Look,
I'm trying to explain to you. He doesn't have control. He tried to pull out Afghanistan, and he made a big spiel about it. He's like, yo, I've been trying to pull out. My staff isn't letting me. And the whole world figured out, oh, shit, the commander-in-chief doesn't have as much power as we thought the commander-in-chief actually has. Because his staff was preventing him from doing something. And then Biden gets in. They're like, well, if you want to do it, that's fine. Because the whole goal was to make Trump look bad.
You're comparing
because
North
he doesn't
Korea
have that
to Israel, and there's no comparison at all. Again, he got $100 million from Sheldon Adelson, and he moved our embassy from Jerusalem.
What does that have to do with Iran?
Please don't. He moved our embassy from Jerusalem, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He also said, hey, you know that land that you stole in the Golan Heights? Yeah. It's yours. I got $100 million. So going about, you seem to know.
What does that have to do with Iran?
What does it have to do with Iran? We're talking about Israel, its major enemy. That's
so you're telling me that it's only
North Korea has nothing to do with that.
So hold on. So you're telling me Iran wasn't Israel's enemy when he had a clear green light to go and bust Iran's ass after they retaliated after we assassinated Soleimani. He couldn't have gone after Iran right then? Why didn't he go after them then?
He didn't go after them then because they hardly retaliated and didn't do a lot. They a little thing into Iraq. Again, you're comparing North Korea to...
They hardly retaliated. They hardly retaliated.
You have the way you see it, and you're saying that he doesn't have control. Judge Napolitano, who spoke, that I do an interview with him every week, and we're very good friends, he spoke with Trump. He spoke with Trump on the phone about releasing the JFK data. And Trump said, what I saw, he said, it was shocking. He said, I can't release it. I can't release it. So it's to say Trump say Trump is taking orders from these other people is, to me, who's he taking? Oh, Bolton's telling him what to do. Pompeo's telling him what to do.
They literally.
Trump doesn't take
they were,
orders
and then when he found out they were wrong, he finally fired them after he found out they were wrong.
From everybody. Trump is his own guy.
Trump doesn't take orders from. That's crazy. That's crazy.
I think that he takes flattery.
I think that he can be flattered. So Trump did. Hold on, one second. Because I got to know, if you don't think Trump takes orders from anybody, who the hell told him to appoint John Bolton? And why did he have to fire him after figuring out that he was dumb?
Well, he appointed him
himself. He didn't know what he was doing.
No,
as a politician.
I'm going to tell you, the people to me that control Trump are the people that give him the donations. And I'm saying that
that works with see, here's the thing. That works with Biden. That works with Kamala. That doesn't work with a billionaire. They gave him money last time. They gave him money. There's a speech of him saying, I'm here. I know you're going to give me all this money, but I just want you to know you're not going to control me like you're going to control them. He gave that speech.
That's the way you see it. Again, Trump's presidential transition team is led by Howard Lutnick, pro-Israel advocate and key mega donor.
He was pro-Israel last election.
I'm just
Why didn't he invade Iran when he had the opportunity then? You just took out their #1 general. Why didn't you do it then? You were pro-Israel. Iran didn't stop being
it was a different
Israel's
situation
enemy in the
back
region.
then than it is now. You got the Gaza genocide going on, and now you got the Lebanon war going on. So it's a different situation now than back then. There wasn't this war going on and this genocidal war in front of everybody's eyes. And listen to Trump saying that any Jew that votes for Harris should all of that. So I think he's going, to say that somebody else is telling him what to do, then he does what he wants.
I just don't see the, I understand because Trump said a lot of words, and that's the thing. I can't really judge his words. I have to judge actions and patterns in what we already know to be true. I know that he had an open,
judge the action that he moved the embassy.
Time out. He has vulnerabilities and people have leverage against him. One example being he was going to pardon Snowden, Assange. And this is the story when McConnell said to him, if you do that, we're not going to support you in that house in the impeachment.
Yeah, that kind
so
of
he
thing.
backed off. So you don't know what's going on.
That kind of thing.
We don't really know if there's other things like that.
I agree.
Including Iran or any of these issues, any issue.
Yeah, but now he's in total control now. He's in control.
Here's the thing.
Much more.
Yeah.
So I don't disagree with you that we don't know what's going on. We can't. It's too hard to know because even this particular staff of Trump is a lot different than the last, and not necessarily in good ways. Like I don't like JD Vance, and I feel like he's way more savvy in the way that he can manipulate Trump than what's his name? I can't remember his name. His last vice president. He was like kind of like a So I don't. But I also think that there is a level of real. So for everybody who's curious, I'm ex-military. My brother's in the military right now. He's intelligence. Like anybody who has been, and I wasn't special forces, but a lot of my family was, and I worked in Fort Bragg and I worked around them. Anybody who understands the situation in Iran knows why we don't invade Iran, because we can't win. That's my point. I guess I should make that more clear. If we could, we wouldn't have sent Iraq to go test Iran in the 90s. We wouldn't keep playing this little tit for tat with them. Because when we know we can bust your ass, we go into your country and we bust your ass. That's what we do. We've always done so. And we've done so to, not necessarily we don't win, but we know that we can at least control the situation more or less. With Iran, we can't predict them. They are not as predictable as the rest of the region that we have all this intel on. We haven't really put boots on ground in Iran in any type of like invasion, on ground invasion. We thought we understood their weapon capabilities until a couple of weeks ago when we found out, oh shit, y'all can pierce the Iron Dome like that. Well, maybe we should think about this a little bit more. We're assuming that we are going to act with Iran like we've been able to act with Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, or other countries in Africa when we can't do so. And I know we can't do it because we haven't done it. If we could do it, we would have done it already. We already tried to do it.
Again,
But we
I'm
don't
not
do it
talking
'cause we
about
can't.
that. I'm talking about Israel, not we. And Netanyahu is just fired Gallant, and he'll do anything he wants to do to keep ramping up this war because he wants to stay in office. And I think they're going to ramp up the war. And if they do, I'm just saying, what will Trump do? And according to what I just read to you, I didn't make this stuff up. They're saying, Trump even said it himself, that these college students that are protesting should go to jail.
Yeah, I mean, Trump says stuff and people say, and of course, Netanyahu.
What the hell is he to say that?
Ingratiate himself. He's got to ingratiate himself with Trump.
But
also, for
that's
that matter, Zelensky
Zelensky
did not come out and say that he's looking forward to working with Trump. So do you really believe that he believes that? No, because he knows Ukraine is done.
No, but we're not talking about Ukraine. I'm talking about Israel.
Okay.
No, but you're saying, oh, they said it from their own mouths, but so did Zelensky. People, it's called diplomacy.
This is in honor of Richard Wolff, who was on our program earlier. It's another one of.
You can press the button.
Another one of. Sorry.
You press the button.
You do it then, Joe.
Yeah, all you do is
another one of Gerald's toys here.
Couldn't hear it.
Oh, let's put it closer to the microphone. Says bullshit level DEFCON 5.
Now that ain't bullshit. That's horse shit. Warning, bullshit alert.
Okay.
That's funny.
We've got a lot of that in American politics. That's right. But you guys have been.
That's for damn sure.
So I think, will they end the Ukraine war? I think it's over.
Yep.
And he's going to do what Biden couldn't do because he was so politically invested in it, which is just cut the money off. Will he cut the money off to Israel? This is a bigger question. And
I don't know about that one.
That's really nice. But speaking of what Patrick said before, that the empire was not part of the campaign, the debate, not discussed. And Caitlin Johnston was quoted. And it reminded me in the 2008 Democratic primary, John Edwards was on WNYC radio, and I was there in New York, and I heard him. Brian Laird asked him, does America have an empire? And there was silence for like 8 seconds. And Edwards finally said, he said, gee, I hope not. So that's the state we're in, a presidential candidate saying, gee, I hope we don't have an empire. They don't recognize it, or they willfully ignore it. They don't see. I mean, they don't see what
I would say that the empire is fading. I would say that it's fading. That's the problem that we're really in right now. I feel like the craziness that we're seeing all around the world is from a lack of order, from an empire that's no longer functioning at the capacity that it once was able to. Like,
it's ending, but they haven't acknowledged that it existed yet.
Exactly. That's part of the reason. But part of the way that they have been able to maintain this particular empire is by never having to acknowledge it exists. You just introduce bad trade deals, like free trade agreements that aren't actually about free trade, right? You introduce NAFTA, you introduce the TPP, you introduce the World Trade Organization, UN. So you maintain your empire through all these institutions and mechanisms without ever having to say we're an empire. But the problem is, the people who were willingly participating because they thought it would benefit them to be a part of that system, like a lot of these African countries, for example, Niger, Burkina Faso, the countries that were once part of ECOWAS, like they're like, oh, this actually does not benefit us at all. We went out, they've liberated themselves, and even with the empire threatening them, right? Because that's what happened after Niger and Burkina Faso and a lot of those countries liberated themselves. They're like, yeah, we don't care. You can't do anything about it. And they just stood down. Right now, Burkina Faso is still
from French colonialism. Well, I have a theory about why Americans don't recognize themselves as having an empire. Go back to Mark Twain, the 19th or 20th century. He was part of the Anti-Imperialist League. There was an open.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, there was an open understanding in America. Books like The Supremacy of American Naval Power and Teddy Roosevelt sending this warship around the world. There was a sense in those days that empire was a thing to be proud of. Certainly the British were. She was the Empress Victoria, Empress of India. This was her title. So having an empire, America's empire in the Spanish-American War, which took care of that decrepit Spanish empire that started with Cromwell trying to overturn the Spanish Empire. That's how long ago, and it ended with the American Empire supplanting it. But something happened where being an empire and imperialist became a dirty word. And I think it was the Soviet Union and the rhetoric of socialists and communists saying the evil empire. So it became evil to have an empire. So America stopped talking about being an empire themselves, and the Soviet Union was the evil empire, as Ronald Reagan said. So they're the imperialists, the ones who first attacked imperialism, the Soviets and communists affiliated, were the ones who are now the empire. But I think it's sad.
It's ironic, right?
Never been acknowledged. And you're laughed at if you talk about American imperialism. It becomes a joke. And here's a very good joke. I'll end my intervention here by saying there was a American businessman who got on a plane in Moscow to fly to Washington, and he sat down next to a Russian, and the American chatting said, well, what are you going to Washington for? And the Russian said, I'm going to do a study of American propaganda. And the American business says, what propaganda? And the Russian said, exactly. Exactly.
Well, that goes again to what we were discussing earlier, where we were talking about the idea that Americans are one of the most if not the most propagandized public.
They don't know they're propagandized. They don't know it.
By far.
That's when you know it's successful. That's when you know it's successful,
Does
right?
anybody know what percentage of the people went out to vote? What the percentage was?
It was probably a small turnout, right? Was it a little turnout?
I don't know. I'm just wondering what it was. If anybody knows.
See if I can find out.
I looked it up.
I saw that at one point the Democrats voter turnout was like 1.7 million lower than Trump. The early voter turnout, which was like, that was a pretty huge sign. Like, oh, this is gonna get ugly quick. Because Republicans always win whenever people don't go vote. So
see what the stats are.
Yeah, no, I couldn't find anything.
But once again, I just find it crazy that in these red states, these progressive policies are passing, like these progressive ballot initiatives are passing, and no one's really talking about it. So maybe they should shift.
That is interesting. Now, Patrick, we were talking before about the Democrats being unable to look in the mirror and assess what they've done wrong and stop blaming Russians and everybody else except for their own shortcomings. And maybe this time, because they got a drubbing, let's face it, it's not close enough to say it was Russia. They lost. They have to look themselves in the mirror. Maybe there's an inkling of that on the front page of the New York Times. Peter Baker, I'm going to read 4 paragraphs, and I want all of your reaction to this. He wrote in the New York Times, in her closing rally on the Ellipse last week, Kamala Harris scorned Donald Trump as an outlier who did not represent America. This is not who we are, she declared. In fact, it turns out that may be exactly who we are, at least most of us. The assumption that Mr. Trump represented an anomaly who would at last be consigned to the ash heap of history was washed away on Tuesday night by a red current that swept through battleground states and swept away the understanding of America long nurtured by its ruling elite of both parties. No longer, this is the key sentence, no longer can the political establishment write off Mr. Trump as a temporary break from the long march of progress, a fluke who somehow sneaked into the White House in a quirky one-off electoral college win 8 years ago. With his comeback victory to reclaim the presidency, Mr. Trump has now established himself as a transformational force, reshaping the United States in his own image. Populist disenchantment with the nation's direction and resentment against the elites proved to be deeper and more profound than many in both parties had recognized. Not people like us, but the big shots in the both parties. Mr. Trump's, then he had to throw this in because it is the New York Times. And maybe the editor stuck this in there. I don't know how this got into this article, but then he stuck in Mr. Trump's testosterone-driven campaign capitalized on resistance to electing the first woman president. So now they had to stick in that. But forget about that. I had to mention because I just saw that tainted otherwise. And what appears to me to be a Democratic newspaper on the front page, you rarely see opinion on the front page of the Times, saying, shit, let's look in the mirror. We are
paywall tomorrow.
The enemy is us. What do you guys think?
It'll be paywall tomorrow, 100% guarantee.
It'll be behind the paywall tomorrow, 100%. I paid.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. So
but no, I do find it interesting that they said, because I felt like he was transformational in 2016. Maybe because like I'm painfully objective, and I'm like, guys, we can't. Steve Bannon actually came out, I think it was in an interview with Bill Maher, maybe, where he said, yeah, no, we actually talked about all of Bernie's policies. We just crafted the rhetoric so that it would be more appealing towards the conservatives. Yeah, we think Bernie does great work. He was probably our biggest threat. And I'm like, well, then that would make him his movement just legitimate, right? And just as powerful as Bernie's movement, if not more powerful, just because of the way the demographics are set up. So, and which is why at the time we were saying the only person that could beat Trump would be Bernie, because people like myself will recognize, like, no, this is not a one-off. Y'all keep pretending like this is a joke. It's not a joke. He's real in what he's created. Like I said, there are some people who run campaigns and there are some people who create movements. And generally speaking, the establishment has always feared anybody, even if they have control over you more or less. Anybody who has the power to make a movement, you are a threat, especially in the case of Trump, who was an unpredictable movement maker. And so I feel like finally they're acknowledging what a lot of us have been saying for a while now, which is no, not everybody from Trump's base is a Nazi. And that's precisely why he is so much of a threat to the Democratic establishment, because you want to believe that this campaign is anomalous, but it's not. Those people are real. Those voters are real. And the ones who voted for him before came back, right? And there are people who y'all thought would have never voted for him prior to this election that came out and voted for him in large numbers. And some people who were no longer threatened by the demagogue that y'all made him to be, who may have just said, we don't want anything to do with this, that you could have used to vote for Kamala this particular election that didn't come out. So I feel like it's I don't know if that will be the dominating thought going forward within the Democrats, but it should be. Like, they need to acknowledge it.
It goes back again to the disconnect between the Beltway and DC and the rest of the country, and basically on both coasts, really, and the rest of the country. Because, I mean, you look at the results from DC, it was what, 94% for Harris? They can't conceive that she would win. They cannot conceive that the rest of the country doesn't understand things the way they do, hasn't been educated in the Ivy League schools that they've gone to, hasn't got, they don't understand it all. And they look down on Trump to such an extent that they see him as a Hitler figure, as a satanic figure almost, because that he represents not just like this dangerous populism and this in their view, horrible set of ideologies when it comes to LGBTQ and women and everything, but because he is thoroughly appealing to the class that they don't recognize, have forgotten, and have never interacted with, that they view as repulsive, that's why you have Biden calling them garbage, Hillary called them deplorables. They're the gutter trash to them. And the people sense that, and that's why they vote for Trump even harder, because they're so resentful of being ignored and put down and for suffering the way they have for the last 4 years and on and on.
So it's basically like a you see us now moment, like, now you see us. I bet you didn't want to pay attention to us before, and they didn't want to pay attention to them during the elections, but people forgot. One thing that Trump had been doing that Kamala had not been doing is campaigning for 4 years. He has been doing rallies in these Beltway or these Rust Belt states for years after he lost, without a guarantee that it would be worth the time or the money or the patience to deal with it, knowing that he would receive the rebuke of the Democratic Party, how they were going to keep coming at him. The harder he would go to bring attention to what he was dealing with, the more that they would weaponize the Justice Department against him and make him the enemy of the people. And he still kept doing it. So for the first time, a lot of people felt seen. And yeah, I knew it was because he was really campaigning again. But the reality of the situation is he kept going back. Like, and people would message me about, like, yo, Trump is back here again, and it's sold out again. Trump is back here again in Wisconsin. Trump is back here again in Michigan. Trump is back here again in even California, North Carolina. And people were remembering that happened, where like Biden and Kamala and the Democrats popped out when it was midterms, like my man said, to talk about abortion, right? Women's rights, when they didn't do anything about it. We literally talked about that last election in 2020. We're like, y'all gonna codify it or what's going on? Nah, we're gonna wait and then blame the Republicans whenever ultimately those rights get repealed. So they didn't, but they used that in the midterms and they disappeared again. But then this time when they disappeared, the war in Ukraine happened, and it was, everything got worse in that regard. The economy got worse. Israel's genocide in Gaza started. World War III damn near popped off. and nothing has gotten better. And all the promises and then Kamala was also saying that everything was good. And then was like, yeah, Biden was great. And now at the end, when she realized everybody didn't feel the same way, it was, no, I'm gonna fix that. I'm gonna fix that. My bad. We was looking at two different polls and two different sets of information. It's like, no, we told you we don't like what's happening and you ignored us. And they feel like Trump, at least, even if he can't articulate it or hasn't articulated it, they're like, I don't know what he's saying or if he even knows what he's saying, but at least he knows we're pissed. That's good enough for me for now. That's how a lot of people feel.
And something we haven't mentioned that I think also contributes to that sense of disconnect and the sense of a completely different reality for people on the coasts versus the rest of the country is the censorship algorithms in technology, social media, Google. There's been research about how Google altered search results to favor Democrats, et cetera, et cetera.
Of course.
And all of that contributes to the idea that if you're in the Beltway, that everybody agrees with you, that the whole world thinks like you do. Like if you went to Reddit's front page for the last 2 months, it was nothing but pro-Democrat propaganda.
Yep.
I think that's really interesting. And then last night I was watching that as the election unfolded. And as it became clearer and clearer that she would lose, it just went blank. There was nothing about her losing. It just changed to different, just unrelated to the election stories, stuff like that. So when people live in that bubble, that technology bubble, their reality, their mental reality about the political landscape is being shaped in a way that, I mean, yes, we talk about the echo chambers that we create for ourselves, but I also think algorithms do intentionally encourage a more pro-Democrat, pro-establishment, pro-polite society bubble that we're all subjected to. And so then people come out of the woodwork voting for Trump, and it's like, I didn't know these people existed. I had never heard their opinions before, except maybe on X. And I'm not saying that X is perfect or for free speech. We had Patrick Lawrence on earlier, who's still censored on X. So I'm not trying to support them in any way, but that's one of the only places that you hear any sort of dissenting opinions at this point in terms of social media.
Yeah, and it's even dependent on what social media, like you said, X is a little bit different because of Elon being so pro-Trump, and I actually believe that's for competition's sake because he doesn't want to compete with True Social. So I feel like it's very calculated, but yeah, it's like they drink their own Kool-Aid. They literally believe, and it's like because like the Democratic elite don't share their intentions with all stratospheres of the Democratic Party. They compartmentalize, and so the lower level Democrats, they don't realize that they're being manipulated by the same algorithm that's actually supposed to be used to manipulate the people who are supposed to be voting for them. It's like, y'all are falling victim to your own propaganda, you idiots. You're supposed to know not to believe this. You're supposed to campaign and behave and interact in politics as if you don't know any of this, right? Just objectively in a bubble or in a vacuum, excuse me. But they don't. They campaign and they talk and they argue their points as if everyone is basing their opinion or their argument or logic off of the algorithm that they're experiencing every day. I can tell you in Brazil, the algorithm here is off. It's weird. It's not good. I can't, it's oftentimes based off of things that came up 2 or 3 years ago in their attempt to manipulate the algorithm. Like it's bad, actually. And that kind of started with Lula, but apparently it's been like that for a few years, even right before Lula. It started with the pandemic, allegedly. And I noticed it because it was like, so I guess the way that it happens in the US is like the propaganda is more organized and very direct in your face. Like they don't ask the question, they answer the question for you and tell you how you're supposed to feel before you read the article. Like here, because of the attempt to prioritize and maybe because of the lack of English or the fact that they're not prioritizing English, or they think nobody else is, they try to push certain articles to the top, even if that article is from 2021. I'll ask a question about Kamala, and it's something positive about her from 2021 that they moved to the top of Google. I'm like, what? Why did you even show me this? This has nothing to do with 2024. Why? Because they're not really prioritizing it, so the propaganda or the lack of organization in that regard is more obvious. But yeah, I feel like the algorithm benefits Democrats. I do believe that the MAGA Republicans sometimes drink their own Kool-Aid. I remember tweeting the other day, like, yo, Trump need to get off Twitter. Because that's like, he needs to remember, like, that's not the real world either. Everybody's not as woke as you think they are, bro. And it's not as big of an issue as you think it is. I think that that's a real thing. Like, people think that being woke is a bigger issue than it is. I feel like they're SJWs, these social justice warriors for both sides, and they need to go touch grass and get off social media And maybe they'll understand what the average American is dealing with so that they can actually properly strategize about how to, in the Democrats' case, turn this thing around. Because I don't see, if they continue this current path, it's going to go, they're going to go through that same period of time where it was like what? Gerald Ford, George H.W., Richard Nixon, like they didn't win an election for a while, or they only had won in a few terms. Like, it'll be like that, but maybe worse. And with the Republicans, if they actually want to continue and maintain power, you can maybe understand genuinely why the people like Trump or rebuked the Democratic establishment and try to emulate some of it and just accept, like, hey, man, maybe it ain't that bad to give an increase in wages. Maybe it isn't that bad to legalize marijuana. Maybe it isn't that bad to not go overturn people's governments for Israel, whoever. And they can maintain power if they do that. But until they start talking to average Americans, I feel like they're going to keep getting weird results, or what they believe is weird results, and keep being perplexed by them.
You know, talking about what Trump did that everybody forgot, and you talk about the lousy economy. Let's go back to 2020, March 13th, Black Friday, 2020. Trump called a national emergency and locked down the country. Trump dumped trillions of dollars of fake money into the economy to artificially prop it up. Trump,
well, in Congress too. That wasn't just a one-man tango.
Can I finish? I don't interrupt you when you're talking. Let me go, right? So here's the deal.
Well, technically you did interrupt me, but I was just saying that it was the government, including Trump.
Let me finish. I'm not going to do this. I think he interrupts me all the time.
All right,
I don't want to hear
Gerald,
this.
come on.
No, really. Have a little respect.
We're on the same side.
Yeah.
Come on. More or less.
So listen, let me finish, and then you could go and say what I say. A lot of people voted for Trump because of the terrible economic conditions, according to the data. And I'm saying Trump caused a lot of those terrible economic conditions that everybody's forgotten about. He locked down the country. He dumped in trillions of dollars of fake money backed by nothing and printed on nothing. He lowered interest rates to 0. This is what built the base for inflation. And what he also did in 2017, he passed a tax law that gave, according to the Tax Policy Center, the 1%, 64% of the tax benefits. And what he sold the tax cuts on was that they're going to use this money for capital improvements. There were no capital improvements. 2018 was the biggest year of stock buybacks ever. So Trump talks one thing, but when you look at what he's done, it's only enriched the rich. And now we go back to 2018. The Dow and the S&P were down 10% in December of 2018. He pushed Jerome Powell to lower interest rates, artificially propped up the equity markets, and everybody forgot about the repo crisis, and who knows what it was. So what I'm saying is the people voted for him believing what he said he's going to do, when what he's done is the opposite of what they're looking for so far. But if he lowers Social Security taxes for people who say they don't have to pay them, great. He said he's going to cut income tax. Terrific. But let's see what he does, and let's see if the bigs don't benefit from it, because they're the only ones that benefited from it during his campaign, during his presidency.
I don't believe that he'll keep his word in the majority of the things that he said. I mean, it's Trump. He's still part of the establishment. Right. The problem is that when we think about it in the vacuum of Trump, is that like we get lost into why the Democrats lost, which is my point is, like, how do we end up back here because what you said is true. He doesn't keep the majority of his promises. So how do we end up back here? Well, it's because we have to look at who was passing the legislation. We have to look at who's voting alongside each other. I personally have always said one of the reasons that that Republicans actually love a Democratic president because they get most of their policies passed while Democrats in power, and not when the Republicans in power, because there's too much pushback. And they don't get anything done without the Democrats constantly agreeing with them. So everything that you said is true. But like when it comes to dumping that money and causing the inflation that was caused, the Democrats were part of writing that bill that was passed without anybody reading it. Anybody, nobody. I remember AOC got a bunch of pushback when everybody figured that out. And people forgot about that. I didn't. But it was Congress alongside Trump and Trump alongside Congress. A lot of their arguments were manufactured and fabricated. They were usually on the same page, except for maybe Trump and Pelosi. But usually they were all on the same page. And that's why I personally feel like it's not a bunch of people expecting Trump to keep his promises. I think it's just a bunch of people pissed off. I think it's just a bunch of people who are pissed off at the system in general. And they're like, who pisses y'all off the most? We're going to vote for him.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I believe he won, because the people are the average person. I call us plantation workers of Slavelandia.
Mm-hmm.
I got my cousin's grandson. This kid went to Sarah Lawrence College, couldn't get a job. He's working for Target. I said, how much does he get? $16 an hour. $16.
Told him he had to go to college, huh? After they told him he had to go to college.
Now, I'm just saying, the people are suffering. The middle class is gone. It's shrunk. And that's, to me, is why they went out for Trump in a lot of ways. I mean, and again, what he said, well, I'll tell you, when he starts saying, I'm going to cut these taxes, I said, boy, this is really a smart move. You know, he did that right at the end, by the way. When he
Social Security, especially.
Yep.
That's Social Security. Because I don't believe Social Security should be taxed.
Yep. Oh, of course not.
Yeah.
So we'll see, though. We'll see. I got to get up out of here. My baby's screaming at the top of his lungs at this point.
While we were speaking, we're going to sign off. While we were speaking, Kamala Harris addressed the nation from Howard University.
Finally.
Alma mater.
Finally.
And she said she conceded defeat, said a big part of democracy is turning over power, but she assured her supporters that it's going to be okay. For everyone who was watching, do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves. They had more time to write a better speech than that, but that was one of the cliches in there. And she essentially says it's going to take time to win this fight. That they won only when it gets dark enough. Can you see the stars? And it's getting dark. So I don't know if they're going to be storming the Capitol on January 6th to prevent Trump's certification. Probably not. But that didn't sound like what the New York Times article said at the beginning, that they have to.
I was just about to say that. It didn't sound like there was any self-reflection in that, right?
Nope,
and it's crazy because I was told that fascism's back. That's what I was told. I mean, if you really thought he was that bad of a guy, if he's going to be the end of democracy, this is a pretty calm reaction to the end of democracy, ain't it?
And a convicted felon on top of that.
Yeah.
Elected.
Right?
Yeah, but
the numbers are just that strong against her. There's no way for them to come back from that. That I think they had to give up at that point. There was nothing they could do.
Yeah, well, again, I think that's pretty good that she didn't come out and say, he didn't deserve to win. We have to fight back. I mean, that's great that she, wasn't that. If it was 2020,
she got killed. It wasn't close. It was a landslide.
But I'm just saying, they come out and try to make it. She didn't come out and divide the nation.
They should have kept Biden in power to October 5th, and then introduce her.
That's what
she had that enormous enthusiasm, those crowds, money, and then they could have had the election 4 weeks later, and she probably would have. But she petered out, ran out of steam. There was nothing there. It was hollow. She had no policy. They didn't want her speaking. They didn't want her answering questions because they knew her head was not filled with intelligent answers, and that really shocked me. I never thought that much about her, but I didn't realize she was
really.
My
grandma lived rather when she was alive in California, and in 2020 or 2019 rather, she was on my head about calling her out. I was like, grandma, because my grandma never asked anything of me in my coverage ever, and she was so adamant about me like revealing all the policies that she had done as DA, what she'd done in A. I'm like, grandma, what? She's like, I hate her She's so stupid and she's destroying our community. And I'm like, wow, okay, I'm just gonna have to look more into her. I didn't think she was that big of a deal. And then, you know, she ended up being a big deal later on. But
I mean, she lost her own state in 2020 in the primary.
Yeah.
She didn't even win her own state. And then she was deeply unpopular as VP. The Democrats, if they wanted to win, should have run an actual primary and gotten Biden out early enough to have done so. They could have actually maybe fielded a candidate that had some enthusiasm. They didn't want to do that.
I think also they didn't know who could beat Trump.
I think that shows contempt for the American voter, that they could just put her out there. And because it's a personality contest and she's young and attractive and he's an old man, compared to Biden, he looked young, Trump. Now you compare him to her and he looks like an old, angry old man, which he is. And therefore, they thought they could dupe the American people. And they got a lesson here, I think. They're not as stupid as they look.
Or act sometimes. Or vote sometimes. Yeah, you know, hey, look, I will say though, it's quite revealing because y'all, once again, we were being sold on this idea that democracy is at stake. That's what every major media pundit. And it's like, don't fret, guys. We'll move on. We'll get past this. Hold on.
That's why it's propaganda.
That's not the urgency you just told us to have 2 days ago.
That's psychological warfare on the American people, to have them that afraid of Trump and to turn around. Oh, PSYOP's over. Bye.
You saw the markets today, right? You saw the equity.
People crying all over social media because they really believe that fascism has arrived, like it hasn't been here, right? Because of what they have told them for the last several months. And it's like, all right, bye. We're good.
And the markets went up today. The Dow went up, 1,500 points?
Wow.
And Bitcoin is through the roof. So here's my thing. I don't know if any of you are betting men or women. I'm not, but I know that I want to lay this out there. Under, over. Trump physically survives for 100 days after his inauguration, or from today. Will he live 100 days more or less than that?
Nah, I think he'll be fine.
All right.
I think he'll survive.
I think he'll survive. Maybe an attempt, but I think he'll survive.
Yeah.
I think it's possible we'll see an attempt on his life. I do.
No, the third time is supposed to be a lucky charm, right? So I wouldn't.
I mean, they come after you twice, you tend to learn your lesson, right? Like I feel like he's gonna be a little bit more quieter about it.
Seriously, that they may have helped him too, that he survived 2 of those. There was a sympathy vote there maybe as well.
That first one definitely. That was a huge surge because everybody was like, well, the only people that we know that have gotten assassinated by governor are the people that were on our side. And that's how a lot of people thought about it.
He had just smashed Biden in the debate right before that happened as well. So it couldn't have come at a better time for Trump.
And right before the day before the convention. That's what made it scary to me it was the day before the convention. Because at that moment, if he was actually killed, Nikki Haley would be the presidential nominee. And it would be basically Nikki Haley versus Nikki Haley.
You know, the other thing too is that I thought that they would get rid of that. They come up, you know, the president had some kind of stroke or whatever, and Kamala Harris is going to become president. That's what I thought they should have done. He should have dropped out and made her president.
He should have. But he was not okay to be president.
He was angry.
I'm just saying, you know,
he still has a pulse. Yeah. That's the problem with that theory. Well, here. Here's my question. Will, in the year 2075, 50 years from now, will they release the Donald Trump assassination files? That's what I want.
Aren't we still waiting for the results of that investigation right now? They're like, we're going to get it. Give us about a week. It's like, well, he's won the election. Right?
Anyway, let me thank Elizabeth Voss in Arkansas and Niko House down in Brazil. We had Richard Wolff in New York, Patrick Lawrence in Switzerland, John Kiriakou, I think, in Northern Virginia, where he lives, and Margaret Kimberley, also in New York City. And from these 2 Bronx Italians in Kingston, New York, we want to thank everybody who was here. Cathy Vogan in Sydney, Australia, who was the producer of this. She, okay, no, I thought she was going to tell me somebody else is coming on. We unfortunately didn't, Brian Becker didn't make it. We don't know why. And Scott Ritter, I asked him last night. He said he was going to try. He didn't give us a firm. But I think we did a great job, and it's an incredibly interesting period right now. And we'll reassemble in a few months and see what he does. I mean, will it be different? The first administration on a whole number of things, if we're still alive. Thank you again. And I want to say goodbye to our, this is Joe Lauria For everyone on this panel, back at Sydney, saying goodbye from CN Live.
Get out your notebook. There's more.
If you are a consumer of independent news, then the first place you should be going to is Consortium News, and please do try to support them when you can. It doesn't have its articles behind a paywall. It's free for everyone. It's one of the best news sites out there, and it's been in the business of independent journalism and adversarial independent journalism for over 2 decades. I hope that with the public's continuing support of Consortium News, it will continue for a very long time to come. Thank you so much.